Chapter 12:19. There was another snowfall in Yuzhou. The chilly white snowflakes were floating in the skyscrapers of Yuzhou province and the sky above the old garden, covering the pavilions, terraces and mansions in the old garden, the clear west mountain, the verdant woods outside the old garden and the winding paths. The snow was getting heavier. The scenery between heaven and earth turned from light white to a vast expanse. Distant mountains, forests, heaven and earth. Everything seemed to have solidified into an almost eternal picture. Only the falling snowflakes in the air were the only things moving in this beautiful picture. There was a breathtakingly beautiful woman in this breathtakingly beautiful picture. It was a color that was completely opposite to the surrounding snow. She wore a black slim-fitting coat, black silk trousers and black high-heeled leather boots. Her black hair was like a black waterfall, occasionally dancing in the cold wind and flying snow. She stood in the best position in the old garden, looking at the vast west mountain in the distance, and under her feet was a blooming red plum blossom. This was a kind of impact that was enough to hit the depths of the soul. If there was a focus in this picture, it must be the black in this vast expanse of white. She stood there quietly with her hands in the pockets of her coat. She was graceful, but her entire person seemed to have a kind of aura. Unconsciously, it suppressed the winter plum blossoms beneath her feet, suppressed the white snow around her, suppressed the distant west mountain and forest. She was colder than the flying snow, more gorgeous than the winter plum blossom, and more piercing than the winter wind. It seemed that the beauty of the world was blooming on her. She was beautiful and flawless. Gu Xianyan looked at Sister Qin's slim back with infatuation, and her beautiful big eyes were full of amazement and envy. That figure stood there quietly, tall and straight, yet incomparably ethereal, like a peerless shadow that resided in the mortal world. It seemed that as long as it moved slightly, it would drift away with the wind and the flying snow into the untainted world. The old garden was located in a corner of the West Mountain Forest Park in Yuzhou. It did not cover an exaggerated area, and it was not famous in Yuzhou. It looked like a yuan lin with a variety of architectural styles. It was originally built in the name of a club, but in fact, it had never entertained guests. It was a private palace built by the Flourishing Age Fund for the Master of Samsara Palace, occupying the best position and the best view in West Mountain. Since the old garden was built, the Master of Samsara Palace had never been here once. Now, it naturally became Qin Weibai's palace. This was the first time that Qin Weibai had come to her hometown, a place that most old Yuzhou people had never heard of. Snow and cold wind danced in the air. In the cold air, she stood there quietly for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. She was like an ice goddess meditating in the wind and snow, with a kind of awe-inspiring and dreamy dignity that could not be blasphemed. Nearly 100 staff members in the entire old garden were serving Qin Weibai alone. No one came to the old garden on weekdays, but the daily operation did not stop. Nearly 100 staff members were the professionally trained elites that Han Donglu transferred from his own club. Today they saw the owner of the old garden for the first time. They were shocked and inevitably whispered. Of course, they did not dare to have any malice, but they could not avoid the curiosity in their hearts. It's the first time that I've seen a woman like Madam. Is she the owner here? Who do you think she is? In the open hall, professional waiters put the dishes on the table one by one. Some took the wine, and some put the tableware. Their movements were light. In the corner, several waiters gathered together and looked at Qin Weibai standing outside the hall from a distance. They whispered. They were all very young and beautiful. One of them had just graduated from college this year. In that well-known university, she also had the reputation of the department belle. However, the appearance of Qin Weibai had completely subverted their understanding of beauty. The so-called beauty turned out to be not the kind of limit that beautiful appearance, clothes and cosmetics matched with the limit. The real beauty had no limit. It was the kind of unimaginable but real perfection. It was the kind of holy and untouchable that was close but far away. Who knows? Another waiter shook his head and whispered. She asked us to call her Madam. This should be her husband's place, right? I've worked here for almost 2 years, and I haven't seen the owner yet. Such a woman should be owned by another man. As a woman, I feel a little heartbroken when I think about it. She has such a strong aura. Even if she is the president of a super multinational company, or the speaker of a certain place, I will believe it. The speaker is unlikely. She is too young. But maybe she is the daughter-in-law of a member of parliament or a director. Such a woman. Her life is not something we can imagine. Is that little girl Madame's daughter? When she grows up, she won't be much worse than her mother. Maybe Madame is waiting for her husband? Daughter? Are you kidding me? Madame is obviously very young. How can she have such an old daughter? Is it a sister? Young. I'm not sure about her age. Maybe 20, maybe 30. But her skin is so good, just like a little girl who has been carefully cared for. Madame just looked at me. And my scalp is still numb now. Little girl? You are so funny. The discussion continued in a trance and envy. It seemed that they all believed that Madame was waiting for her husband. In the hall, exquisite dishes were served one by one, looking and smelling good. The deep and melodious bell rang in the old garden, echoing in the snowy world. Qin Weibai raised her wrist and looked at her watch. Almost at the same time she lowered her head. A figure being led over outside the moon gate beside her also stopped. It was a woman who appeared outside the moon gate. Compared to Qin Weibai, who was 1.75 meters tall, and was wearing high-heeled leather boots, she was very petite. She was wearing a dark windbreaker, a beige scarf, a black skirt, and a pair of marten shoes. It was a simple combination, but when she put it on, there was a sense that these clothes should belong to her and only her. There was a sense of harmony in them, as if they were made by nature. Her carefully groomed chestnut curls were scattered lazily. This was also a woman who was so beautiful that it was hard to tell her specific age. Maybe she was not as beautiful as Qin Weibai, but it was enough to make people toss and turn unforgettable. Mature, gentle, quiet, well-behaved, charming, and full of charm. She seemed to be in her 20s, in her 30s, or in her 40s. On different occasions, in front of different people, her every expression, every movement, every smile, every word, every different face, and every temperament that could be switched freely seemed to be able to satisfy all the beautiful fantasies of men about women. She might not have the strength to fight tit for tat with countless superiors in various fields without falling into a disadvantageous position. She did not have the temperament to be unmoved by the wind and rain. She did not have the treacherous and unpredictable tactics that were impossible to guard against. But when such a woman stood in front of him, she still gave people the feeling that she was unfathomable. She was a woman, but she was also like countless women. Charming, lazy and naive, noble and elegant, delicate and pitiful. There seemed to be countless faces under her beautiful face. She and Qin Weibai could be said to be the kind of people who made different choices. Qin Weibai chose to conquer the world by herself. She gave all her charm, enthusiasm, and charm to Li Tianlan without reservation. She even gave her country to Li Tianlan. She did not have the ability to conquer the world, but she used all her charm, enthusiasm, and charm to control the man who could conquer the world. Qin Weibai looked up and saw her. She also saw Qin Weibai at the same time. The somewhat petite but exceptionally exquisite delicate body stood there. For a moment, under the flying snow, all her hidden faces seemed to be frozen. She looked at Qin Weibai, and all her emotions seemed to turn into the deepest vigilance in the shortest time. Qin Weibai laughed. Her voice was clear, but it fell in the woman's ears like thunder. Mask, it's our first time meeting. I've heard a lot about you. After a pause, she continued. You know me, don't you? So there's no need for me to introduce myself. The masked lady's body tensed up. Her eyes were either misty or hazy, and the vigilance in them was almost tangible. She was like a cat protecting its own secret. Her hair stood up quietly, but she tried to maintain her shock. I've heard a lot about you. What's there to look up to about me? Did you ask me out? Yes. Qin Weibai's smile was impeccable. Whether it was her appearance, temperament, or her own style, she almost crushed the mask in front of her. I've wanted to talk to you for a long time. A long, long time ago, but I never had the chance until now. Mask took a step back subconsciously. She was a little short of breath. The last trace of calmness seemed to have become her shield, which she held tightly. In the face of Qin Weibai's calm sharpness, she felt that she saw a trace of gradually expanding cracks on the shield, which made her panic. If there's nothing else, I'll go first. Mask took a deep breath and said in a soft voice. Do you know what the name of this place is? Qin Weibai chuckled and directly gave the answer. This is the hometown. Mask's body was a little stiff. The hometown. She whispered the word, and her eyes were in a trance. No one knew what she was thinking of. You're a very cautious person. I know you very well. Qin Weibai said faintly. You know me. You know who I am, so you're on guard against me and even afraid. But do you really want to go? If you really wanted to go, you wouldn't have come today. Well, you can say that you don't know that I asked you out. But you're so cautious that you can keep the appointment because of a word. I can be sure that some things are very important to you. So, compared with your vigilance against me now, which one is more important? Mask's expression kept changing. She was a little tangled and looked more delicate and pitiful, which made people want to hold her in their arms and comfort her. In the light footsteps, Gu Xianyan trotted over and stood beside Qin Weibai. She looked curiously at the strange and charming woman in front of her, as if she didn't know the relationship between her and Qin Weibai. Your life shouldn't have been like this. Qin Weibai said softly. Don't you really want to know what happened in the depths of West Lake in Lin, and 25 years ago? Like a peerless swordsman with outstanding beauty, Qin Weibai looked at the struggling eyes of Mask, and thrust her sword straight to the vital part. Jiang Nishan? Or should I call you Gu Qingqiu? Gu Qingqiu's face was pale, and her body was shaking. She even couldn't stand steadily. She stared at Qin Weibai with unconcealable fear in her eyes. It seemed that the shield she held in front of her had finally lost the sharpness of Qin Weibai. The last trace of calmness was torn apart in Qin Weibai's whisper. Her defense line was shaky and about to collapse. How do you know? She tried to open her mouth, but her voice, which was originally very beautiful, became a little hoarse. Gu Xianyan narrowed her eyes and looked seriously at the strange woman in front of her. Although she was very young, no one really treated her as a child, whether she was with Qin Weibai or in Kunlun City. She was cultivated regardless of her age. Gu Xingyan regarded her as a chain that might be able to tie Li Tianlan or other super heavyweights in the future. And Qin Weibai felt that she needed to cultivate a successor. Therefore, the sensitive situation of outsiders looking at flowers in the fog was never a secret to Gu Xianyan. It was never a secret to her. As long as she wanted to know, she could know the basic sequence of events. The flames of war had spread all over Zhongzhou State. Late at night 7 days ago, Li Huaqing personally flew to Emperor Dong's palace, and had not returned to Zhongzhou State yet. In the morning after that night, the academy and the new group began to pour fire on each other almost at the same time. 7 days was neither a long time nor a short time. When the resources of both sides were fully mobilized, everyone could smell the fierce smoke of gunpowder after the war. As of today, the two groups affiliated to the Flourishing Age Fund had been in trouble. One of them might face a huge fine of more than 1 billion Zhongzhou dollars, and the other was likely to be completely closed down. Many departments were completely firing at the Flourishing Age Fund. The stocks of many listed companies affiliated to the Flourishing Age Fund were shaking violently. The groups that had dealings with the Flourishing Age Fund in many fields were a little uneasy. This brief introduction affected the entire stock market of Zhongzhou State. The Flourishing Age Fund was so big that almost no one knew its specific scale, except for Han Donglu. This neutral wealthy family, which seemed to be a financial giant entrenched in Huating on the surface, had quietly extended its tentacles to all aspects in the past. Energy, aerospace, minerals, real estate, internet, construction, hotels, film and television media, medicine and health, electricity, communications, automobile manufacturing, insurance, fashion, daily necessities, retail. The shadow of the Flourishing Age Fund could be seen everywhere in dozens of fields. In more fields, the Flourishing Age Fund seemed not to be directly involved, but it held a large number of shares of other groups. Such a situation of great momentum was destined to have withered branches, and there were all kinds of birds in the woods. It was inevitable that some black sheep would appear, which was something that even Han Donglu could not control. The Flourishing Age Fund found more and more problems in 7 days. Han Donglu, who had flown from Yuzhou to the headquarters of Huating, was calm and collected. But the joint investigation of various departments was getting more and more difficult. It was not that they could not find any problems, but that they were afraid. In just a few days, the overall loss of the Flourishing Age Fund had reached billions, and there were also a lot of righteous forces involved. Everyone could see the continuous bleeding of the new group, but everyone could also see the growing shock in the economic field of Zhongzhou State. The whole parliament was a little uneasy, and there were even voices that some problems should be handled with caution. Several prominent international funds seemed to have aimed at the stock market of Zhongzhou State, and were ready to make a move. Star State also seemed to have a plan to announce the appreciation of Star Dollar. Everyone was waiting for an opportunity, or a suitable node, and then they could give a fatal blow to the economy of Zhongzhou State. Everyone knew that it would be very convenient to start with the Flourishing Age Fund, and they could also find some problems. They did find problems, but they also found that the Flourishing Age Fund they knew was only the tip of the iceberg of the real Flourishing Age Fund. With the deepening of the investigation, the huge outline of the Flourishing Age Fund beyond the limits of everyone's imagination had faintly emerged. It was a huge and incredible monster. And this was just the industry of the Flourishing Age Fund in Zhongzhou State. What else did the Flourishing Age Fund have in the world? If the economy of the entire Flourishing Age Fund was combined, some people had estimated that it was even a behemoth close to the economy of the Wang family of Beihai. The confrontation between the academy and the new group was in full swing. But no one dared to joke about the future of Zhongzhou State. Therefore, the joint investigation of various departments was getting more and more difficult, and the pressure from all sides was increasing. The academics were looking for a new breakthrough. The internal turmoil of the Flourishing Age Fund was turbulent, but in 7 days, Liaodong had already been in turmoil. Tan Xiaotian had been officially investigated in secret 3 days ago. Originally, everyone thought that it was just the problem of the National Highway Reconstruction Project of Feng Tian. After knowing that Wang Wei, the leader of the 3rd inspection team, had entered Jiangxia, Bai Qingqian wanted to slap Wang Wei in the face. But no one expected that Bai Qingqian was completely touched this time, and she completely fell out with him. From the feedback from all sides, the problem of the national highway reconstruction could only be regarded as a trivial matter for Tan Xiaotian. His real problem was in Anong. It was an illegal trade network he built in Anong that connected the peninsula, and from the peninsula to the periphery of Snow Country and Goryeo. It involved the scope of polar light, from food to population to arms. Tan Xiaotian could get huge profits just by saying hello. At present, it was not clear how big this dark economic chain was, but a conservative estimate showed that the amount had exceeded hundreds of billions. Tan Xiaotian. Hundreds of billions. The two were obviously not the same concept. So how many people were involved in the hundreds of billions? Anong developed very fast in Liaodong, and it was also jokingly known as the secretary class. At its peak, there were 13 directors in Anong, and 7 of them were secretaries. Such a scene was rare in the whole Zhongzhou State. People jokingly discussed that Anong developed very fast, so the big bosses would put their trusted secretaries to guild. When the time came, there would be a golden road in front of them. Tan Xiaotian's resume seemed to confirm this. From the mayor of Anong to the deputy speaker of Feng Tian, although the rank was the same, the prospects were completely different. After the election in a few months, no matter where he went, Tan Xiaotian would definitely be a deputy governor, which had something to do with the rapid development of Anong. But when this illegal trade chain appeared, everyone was considering whether the big bosses put their secretaries in Anong to gild, or to protect some secrets that could not be exposed. No one knew where this idea came from, but in just a few days, it had become very popular in Liaodong. Today, in addition to Tan Xiaotian, 3 directors in Anong had been secretly investigated by the Ministry of Supervision of Liaodong. There was no doubt that these 3 people were secretaries, and one of them was the secretary of the current governor of Liaodong. A monstrous storm was brewing in Liaodong. Everyone could guess the answer that was about to break out of the shell, and was destined to be earth-shattering. No one expected that Bai Qingqian would act so fiercely. She did want to deal with Tan Xiaotian and Wang Wei, but what she wanted to do this time was to completely destroy the core base of the academics and capture all the forces of the academics in one fell swoop. The monstrous pressure pressed down from the parliament to Liaodong. Not only the academics but also individuals from the giant group, the southeast group, and even the north group called by Qingqian, trying to suppress this matter, or at least control it within a certain range. At this time, Hua Zhengyang, the leader of the academy in Yuzhou, the vice minister of the cabinet, had a thorough talk with Bai Qingqian. The conversation between the two was almost a reprimand from Hua Zhengyang to Bai Qingqian. Vice Minister Hua clearly told Bai Qingqian that the parliament supported her work, but hoped that she would not make a fuss and make trouble out of nothing. In the current situation, stability came first. Bai Qingqian, however, was tit for tat and did not give any face to the leader of the academy. Her response at that time was also very clear to Gu Xianyan, because after this incident, Qin Weibai and Bai Qingqian talked on the phone, and did not avoid her at that time. Bai Qingqian said so at that time. Tan Xiaoyan's problem is not only a problem of Zhongzhou state, but also a serious injury to our friendship with the peninsula. Vice Minister Hua, you can think about how serious the consequences will be if this matter is suppressed. One day, when the people of the peninsula who can't even eat enough and can't even afford to wear clothes learn that their young and beautiful women have come to Zhongzhou state to engage in various industries under the temptation of people like Tan Xiaotian. What kind of situation and consequences will it be? Can you and Liaodong bear the consequences? This question could be said to be powerful and resonant. Hua Zhengyang even threw the phone on the spot. At present, the third supervisory group was still active in Jiangxia, but the team leader, Wang Wei, had already closed his door and did not participate in the summary meeting of the supervisory group. Tan Xiaoyan's accident directly made Wang Wei's reputation in Zhongzhou state drop to the freezing point. Everyone was still waiting for Tan Xiaotian to be completely broken through, waiting for this storm to completely engulf the few big shots standing at the top of Liaodong. Under such circumstances, it seemed that they were afraid of the complete rebound of the academics, so the giant group also began to quiet down. Bai Zhanfang and Zhou Mulin, who had already had a countermeasure, began to quietly put away the cards in their hands that they were ready to play, waiting for the right time. As a result, the flames of the two battlefields of Liaodong and the flourishing age fund continued to burn, igniting the overall situation. Under such circumstances, Qin Weibai, who had been quiet in Yuzhou, suddenly made an appointment with this woman in front of her, which made Gu Xianyan instinctively feel that something was wrong. At this time, Qin Weibai could not meet a meaningless person. Gu Qingqiu, Jiang Nishang. Gu Xianyan blinked her watery eyes and looked at the woman in front of her. What kind of impact could she have on the next overall situation? Her surname was Gu. Was she from Kunlun City? It shouldn't be. Otherwise, how could she not know her? Qin Weibai looked at Gu Qingqiu quietly, looking at the horror in her eyes. If these two names were a sword that pierced the vital point, then Qin Weibai's next words were a fatal blow. You are 36 years old this year, and you have been carrying out tasks since you were 21. Your codename is Fairy, and your secondary codename is Mask. Those who know these two codenames think that there are two people. In fact, both codenames are you. You desire freedom, like photography, and have always dreamed of traveling all over the world. But if you want to fulfill this dream, you need to continue working for another 14 years. You like Switzerland and want to settle down there. Someone promised you a large sum of money when you were 50 years old, and helped you get Swiss citizenship. But you have never been to Switzerland. If the farthest place you have been is England, because your child is studying there. He should have just entered middle school this year. You had a boyfriend in college. During your mission, you even performed an abortion for your boyfriend. That was your biggest mistake. You still contact him occasionally, but you don't love him anymore. You even want to. Enough. Gu Qingqiu's body fell to the ground. She covered her ears, shook her head wildly and screamed. Qin Weibai looked at her with a smile. She was not indifferent or enthusiastic. There was a touch of trance and sadness in her eyes. You are afraid, she whispered. What are you afraid of? Are you afraid that I will tell these things to your master? Or afraid that I will tell these things to your man? Gu Qingqiu raised her eyes and looked at Qin Weibai. Her eyes seemed to be looking at a devil in an angel's clothes. Why do you know these? Why do you know these impossible? Gu Qingqiu muttered to herself. She seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Qin Weibai did not speak. She turned and walked to the antique open hall. Gu Xianyan looked at Gu Qingqiu seriously. She hesitated and trotted to follow Qin Weibai, like a butterfly. Qin Weibai walked into the hall and took off her coat. The simple pure white sweater outlined her figure and looked more charming and soft. Gu Xianyan gently pulled her hand and whispered, "Sister, she is." Qin Weibai sat on the chair, looked out of the window and said calmly, "Li Shi's successor is also your predecessor. If you continue to stay in Kunlun City, you can get in touch with her about a year later. She will become your teacher." Gu Xianyan's brain was stunned for a moment. She opened her small mouth wide and looked stunned. Her predecessor. Li Shi's successor. This identity could not be more obvious. Kunlun City, the previous generation of Phoenix Pavilion. Master. Gu Xianyan shook her head subconsciously, feeling a little confused. Gu Qingqiu. This was a figure hidden at the bottom of Kunlun City's secrets. Gu Xianyan was not surprised that there was such a figure in Kunlun City. But the previous pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion turned out to be a figure hidden at the bottom of Kunlun City's secrets. She stayed in Kunlun City for several years. The two invincible realm experts in Kunlun City were both her teachers. She was in daily contact with the high-level officials of Kunlun City. They would teach Gu Xianyan their experience in various aspects, and they would talk about some random things when chatting. But Gu Qingqiu, she had never heard of this name before. Not even once. Did no one know of her existence? Or did everyone know but did not tell her? 25 years ago, Gu Xianyan recalled this time point. That should be the time when the Li family collapsed and Li Shi officially completed her task and became the wife of the Lord of Kunlun City. At that time, did Kunlun City find a second pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion? No. Gu Qingqiu was 36 years old this year. According to Qin Weibai, Gu Qingqiu should have joined Kunlun City 25 years ago. She was 11 years old that year. Qin Weibai said that she started to carry out tasks at the age of 21. In other words, Gu Qingqiu was the pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion 15 years ago? 15 years. 25 years. For such a long time, Kunlun City had been hiding her in the deepest place? So who was her task target? Gu Xianyan suddenly felt that Gu Xingyan was a little scary. Putting everything else aside, just the depth of his thoughts that were hidden in the dark was something that most people couldn't compare to. Sister, who is her task target? Gu Xianyan asked cautiously. Phoenix Pavilion had not been established for a long time in Kunlun City. Li Shi was the first pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion. Her task target was the youngest invincible realm expert in the world at that time. The first person of the young generation in Zhongzhou State at that time. The heavenly son of the Li family whose edge could suppress Wang Tianzong, the youngest marshal in Zhongzhou State at that time. And the future god of war in Zhongzhou State, Li Kuangtu. Li Shi, the first pavilion master, successfully destroyed Li Kuangtu. Gu Xianyan was the third pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion. Kunlun City's target was even more terrifying. Li Tianlan. This was a pavilion master who took Li Tianlan as her task target. Was she arrogant and conceited? Did she have no F*king idea? Was she ignorant? It was really not. Kunlun City regarded her as the third pavilion master. It seemed to be just a simple identity, but in fact for this identity, all departments of Phoenix Pavilion had made the most cautious and meticulous analysis, and there were millions of theoretical reports to support this conclusion. They made Gu Xianyan the third pavilion master, which meant that they firmly believed that Gu Xianyan was qualified to hunt Li Tianlan. That million-word theoretical report was the foundation that supported all of this. They would analyze Li Tianlan's character in terrifying detail, summarize his preferences, collect all kinds of details about him, all his hobbies, and then cultivate Gu Xianyan from various fields. This kind of targeting was undoubtedly the most terrifying and impeccable. The cultivated Gu Xianyan might not be the most perfect, but it was certain that, in the analysis of Kunlun City, such Gu Xianyan must be the most perfect in Li Tianlan's eyes. Of course, Gu Xianyan couldn't do this now. But there was no problem with everything. Li Tianlan was young enough, and Gu Xianyan was immature enough. She still had a lot of time to grow up and be cultivated. Kunlun City had enough strength to equip her from all aspects. In this process, how many resources to mobilize and how much money to spend were not the issues that Kunlun City considered at all. They could spend tens of billions just to cultivate a woman who could stay with Li Tianlan and make him love her so much. Then the tens of billions of funds were valuable, and it would definitely bring Kunlun City a return that far exceeded the cost. This was the idea that Kunlun City built Phoenix Pavilion. And this idea was indeed successful now. They cultivated Li Shi, successfully overthrew the Li family, and replaced it. Li Shi hunted Li Guangtu in the past. Gu Xianyan would hunt Li Tianlan in the future. This was Gu Xingyun's plan. There were always some people who said that smart people would not fall in the same place twice. In fact, history always repeated itself. Kunlun City was full of confidence. Because this was the core secret of their success. No one would doubt the way to make themselves successful. At least not before they failed. Therefore, the first and third Phoenix Pavilion Masters had absolutely powerful hunting targets. Then what about the second Phoenix Pavilion Master? This woman was so low-key that she seemed to not exist even in Kunlun City. She hit so deeply. This woman who had been on duty for 15 years and had successfully hunted for 15 years. Who was her target? Qin Weibai looked at the wine in front of her, then picked up the freshly squeezed orange juice on the side, poured herself a glass, and whispered, "It's Cheng Shilai." Gu Xianyan didn't speak for a while. Maybe she didn't react, or maybe she couldn't believe it at all. She blinked and tilted her head to look at Qin Weibai. "Sister, who are you talking about?" "Cheng Shilai." Qin Weibai's voice was calm. Gu Xianyan didn't respond. She seemed to be almost numb by the impact of this name. Cheng Shilai. This was a name that was not very familiar to the people of Zhongzhou State. Because of his low profile, many media would often mention it even when reporting. At his behest, a department replaced his name. Ministry of Personnel. Cheng Shilai. Zhongzhou State Counselor, Minister of the Ministry of Personnel of Zhongzhou State. Li Huaqing's first confidant, and the academic's first corps general. He was also one of the most popular flag-type figures of the academics today. He was recognized as the most low-key counselor in Zhongzhou State, and also one of the most courageous counselors in the parliament. If the most simple sentence was used to describe Cheng Shilai's weight in Zhongzhou State, he was the strongest opponent of Wang Qinglei from the Wang family of Beihai. Yes, it was Wang Qinglei, who had a bright future in the Wang family of Beihai, not the current Wang Qinglei. If it weren't for Li Huaqing's re-election in this election, Cheng Shilai would almost certainly be pushed into the director's seat by the academics without any accident. And even if Li Huaqing was re-elected, Cheng Shilai was still very likely to become one of the directors of Zhongzhou State after the election, one step ahead of Wang Qinglei. Even if he couldn't go further, he would continue to sit in the position of Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, with students all over Zhongzhou State and a more solid foundation. After 5 years, the possibility of him directly succeeding Li Huaqing would also greatly increase. There was no doubt. Cheng Shilai's existence was the academic's greatest hope in the post-Li Huaqing era. When Wang Qinglei's future was obscure, Cheng Shilai, who was getting more and more stable, was almost the heir in everyone's eyes. What did this mean? Cheng Shilai, the academics, Kunlun City, Phoenix Pavilion. This is terrible. Gu Xianyan muttered to herself. Gu Xingyun is terrible. Yes, he put a woman with Cheng Shilai for 15 years. The most important thing is that she never made any request to Cheng Shilai. She just silently waited for Cheng Shilai to become a director, or to climb to the top of Zhongzhou State. In terms of long-term planning, Gu Xingyun can be regarded as a true disciple of the Li family. Qin Weibai's voice was a little subtle. In her sight, Gu Qingqiu, bathed in the wind and snow, stood up shakily and looked deeply at Qin Weibai in the hall. The two people's eyes met, and there seemed to be sparks in the air that were enough to burn the flying snow. Qin Weibai's expression was cold and proud. She raised the orange juice in her hand, and through the bright and transparent floor-to-ceiling window in the hall, she greeted from a distance. Gu Qingqiu hesitated and took a step forward. Qin Weibai raised the corner of her mouth. She could bring disaster to the country and people. Sister, You want to use Gu Qingqiu to destroy Qingxilai? Even destroy the whole academics? Gu Xianyan was a little excited. After all, she was a child. No matter how mature she was, the childishness of wanting the world to be in chaos still existed. Destroy the academics? Qin Weibai couldn't help laughing. How is it possible? Even if Qingxilai falls, it will at most frustrate the layout of the academics for the next 10 years, far from being destroyed. Kunlun City has bet heavily on Qingxilai. In other words, Qingxilai is now flawless. Because Gu Qingqiu has never made any request to him that goes against his own position. Nor has she done anything excessive. Gu Qingqiu is indeed from Phoenix Pavilion, but in Gu Xingyun's eyes, before Qingxilai reaches the top, she does nothing but complete the task. Qin Weibai blinked her eyes and said softly, so although Gu Qingqiu's background can't be changed, just from looking at it now, she's actually just Qingxilai's lover. Moreover, she's an extremely obedient and dutiful type. What impact can a lover have on Qingxilai? Even if it's exposed, it's just like that. Not to mention any punishment, there won't even be a verbal criticism. Destroying the academics like this, unless the academics is made of paper, then you are. Gu Xianyan was a little confused. Since she had doubts, she naturally had to ask. She was the successor cultivated by Qin Weibai, and Gu Xianyan also understood this. No matter how intelligent the goddess was, no matter how invincible Emperor Dong was, they would eventually grow old and could not disobey the will of time, but Emperor Dong's palace would always exist. And Gu Xianyan was the best candidate to assist the future palace lord of Emperor Dong's palace in Qin Weibai's expectation. From now on, Gu Xianyan would absorb everything and grow wildly. I need to detonate Gu Qingqiu, the bomb, and use Qingxilai to test something that I have always been confused about, but it's very important. Qin Weibai's eyes narrowed slightly, and she continued, and the outside world is now guessing what trump card Li Huaqing has in Emperor Dong's palace. They don't know, but I do. Li Huaqing does have a trump card in his hand, and his trump card can indeed persuade Tianlan to compromise in an instant, which will be far more beneficial than the purgatory of heaven capital. It's just that Li Huaqing himself is hesitating whether to play this card or not. So there is the current confrontation. If Qingxilai's matter is exposed, the subsequent impact will also indirectly stimulate Li Huaqing, so that he will make up his mind earlier and end all this. Qin Weibai's red lips were soft, and her white teeth gently bit the straw. It's like killing two birds with one stone. Gu Qingqiu finally made up her mind and walked into the hall. She took off her scarf and coat, standing opposite Qin Weibai, looking at her silently with a calm expression. Qin Weibai chuckled, reached out her hand and said lightly, "Please sit down." Chapter 12:20. Gu Qingqiu sat down slowly. The wind and snow outside with the cold temperature seemed to calm her down a lot. She seemed to have regained her composure, but she looked a little haggard, so she was more delicate. The light in Gu Xianyan's eyes flowed, and she sighed in admiration in her heart. This woman was naturally extremely beautiful, but the most attractive thing was not her appearance or her proud figure, but her temperament that seemed to be able to hook into the depths of one's soul. Every movement, every expression, would cause others to involuntarily focus their gazes on her. Gu Xianyan could imagine the light when she attended various banquets, shining but not dazzling. No matter where she went on any occasion, she would be the absolute focus. Maybe she didn't need to do anything, and she didn't need to hold any power. She just walked in the crowd, and people would pay attention to her. She was as gentle as jade without threat. This was a woman who didn't even have the idea of jealousy from the same sex. To this extent, a vase was completely equivalent to a priceless treasure. "What do you want to talk about?" Gu Qingqiu gently bit her rosy lips and asked in a low voice. She was still a peerless beauty, but under Qin Weibai's aura, she had become a very ordinary beauty, and her spirit was crushed in all aspects. Gu Qingqiu suddenly felt a little humiliated. She suddenly felt like an ugly duckling sitting in front of a swan. That kind of whiteness and beauty filled her entire field of vision, bringing with it a loneliness and pride that seemed to be able to stab at her dignity. This caused the line of defense she had reconstructed in her heart to waver once again. "No hurry. Qin Weibai looked at Gu Qingqiu calmly. Eat something first. What do you want to drink? Gu Qingqiu shook her head in a trance, looking at the drinks on the edge of the table. There were freshly squeezed orange juice and mixed fruit juice, fruit wine brewed by Gu Yuan, and red wine that was waking up. There was an ice bucket in the small dining car on the edge of the table, and 2 champagne bottles were lying in it. She looked like a cold beauty. Cola, which could be said to be the public enemy of women, was naturally not available. Gu Qingqiu reached out and poured herself a glass of white wine. She picked it up and drank it. The spicy smell of wine rolled in her stomach, and she choked and coughed violently. Qin Weibai looked at her quietly, with a distant color in her eyes that no one could see through. Gu Qingqiu stopped coughing with difficulty, and 2 groups of red appeared on her face, looking more and more charming. Let's eat. Qin Weibai glanced at her and said with a smile, this place is usually very hidden, and almost no one comes here. Therefore, no one will know that you are here today. Besides the 2 of us, no one else here will know who you are. She picked up a piece of winter melon and placed it on the plate in front of her. Gu Qingqiu looked at the sumptuous dishes in front of her, then looked at the cutlery. The temperature of the hall was just right, but she felt a coldness that was even colder than when she was outside. There were 12 dishes on the table, and most of them were vegetarian dishes with bright colors. Of the 2 meat dishes, one was a pigeon, and the other was neither fish nor fowl. It was a plate of dog meat that would not appear in most banquets. There was a saying in Zhongzhou state that dog meat should not be served, but this plate of dog meat was placed in the middle of all the dishes, as if it was a glaring reminder. Others might not know that Gu Qingqiu, who looked beautiful, refined, elegant, and delicate, actually loved to eat dog meat. Cheng Shilai, who had been with her for many years, did not know this. In her memory, this was a secret that only her dead parents and Gu Xingyin knew. The 12 dishes were her favorite on weekdays. The tableware was made of pure silver, and the tableware was carved with orchid patterns, which were also her favorite, plus what Qin Weibai had said before. This kind of fear of being understood little by little from the details was constantly rising in her heart. She did not know why the other party knew her existence. She also did not know why the other party knew her so well. The vigilant instinct was screaming wildly, reminding her to leave this dangerous woman in front of her, but she did not dare to move and sat in the same place. Gu Qingqiu watched Qin Weibai eat gracefully, drank a glass of orange juice, and watched the people around her prepare desserts after the meal. Gu Qingqiu ate something randomly. The taste should be very good, but she could not taste it at all. Xianyan does not know you, but you should be familiar with her. After eating quietly, Qin Weibai picked up a tissue and wiped the corners of her mouth. Her movements were delicate and elegant. Yes. Gu Qingqiu opened her mouth vigilantly. Of course, she knew the existence of Gu Xianyan. Not long ago, Gu Xingyin communicated with her, and said that he would let Gu Xianyan practice in Huading for a year to broaden her horizons. After that, he would find a suitable opportunity to let Gu Xianyan be by her side, and let her personally teach her. Between the lines, Gu Qingqiu could hear the importance and expectation that Gu Xingyin attached to this girl. Gu Qingqiu had already begun to come into contact with some of Gu Xianyan's information, and began to consciously think about how and what she should teach her. Gu Xianyan needed to broaden her horizons, and she also needed a year's time to prepare to train her into the Phoenix Pavilion's pavilion master. However, no one expected that Gu Xianyan would make such a sharp and crazy backstab in Huading. Phoenix Pavilion was completely exposed, and the Special Warfare Group in Kunlun City were in turmoil. However, Gu Xianyan stood beside Qin Weibai and became a highly valued figure in Emperor Dong's palace. Gu Qingqiu silently glanced at Gu Xianyan. Gu Xianyan blinked her big eyes and looked at her innocently. Her acting skills were really good. Gu Qingqiu lowered her head and took a sip of juice. Li Shi Gu Qingqiu Gu Xianyan. Third generation Pavilion Master of Phoenix Pavilion. The first generation Pavilion Master was now the Deputy Palace Lord of Emperor Dong's palace. The third generation Pavilion Master seemed to be fully trained by Qin Weibai. Only she, the second generation Pavilion Master, was still faithfully fulfilling her obligations. Gu Qingqiu was very sure that Li Shi and Gu Xianyan were definitely not Qin Weibai's sources of information. In the entire Kunlun city system, Gu Qingqiu did not exist, and there was no second-generation pavilion master in Phoenix Pavilion. In the entire Kunlun city, only one person knew of her existence, and that was Gu Xingyun. Even Gu Qianchuan did not know of her existence. Such a degree of secrecy naturally meant that Gu Xingyun had to spend more resources to train her. But now she had been with Cheng Xilai for 15 years and gave birth to a son for him. Now Wang Qinglei's future was unknown, and Cheng Xilai was more and more brilliant. Gu Xingyun's efforts had undoubtedly begun to pay off. Xianyan will be with me from now on. Qin Weibai whispered. I can teach her what you can teach her. I can teach her what you can't teach her. Even if I don't understand, it doesn't matter. I can find the most professional people in the world to teach her. Emperor Dong's palace is far better than Kunlun City in terms of resources and prospects. I can't be sure of Xianyan's future. In the future, when Tianlan and I are old, Xianyan may not become the hostess of Emperor Dong's palace, but she will definitely have the same power as the hostess of Emperor Dong's palace. What does it have to do with me? Gu Qingqiu said lightly. In fact, I believe in Kunlun City's vision in this regard, but I don't quite agree with their approach. Their approach has many limitations, but they have a good eye for selection, especially the candidates for the Pavilion Master of Phoenix Pavilion. Especially the candidates for the Phoenix Pavilion Master. If possible, we don't want to miss out on any of them. Qin Weibai looked into Gu Qingqiu's eyes, and her voice was clear and sharp. I don't know what you're talking about. Gu Qingqiu suddenly smiled. Perhaps her heart was still shaken, but on the surface, she had completely calmed down. A gentle and beautiful smile bloomed at the corner of her mouth. It had a soul-stirring charm. What is Phoenix Pavilion? She couldn't clearly admit anything in front of Qin Weibai. Even if Qin Weibai knew her beyond her imagination. Qin Weibai smiled, and didn't seem to mind Gu Qingqiu's pretending to be stupid. She just said slowly, Phoenix Pavilion has very strict requirements for the selection of pavilion masters, not only in terms of body and appearance, because the hunting target of the pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion is the big shots who can affect the world. From the perspective of current science, every pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion has to bear a lot of karma. Therefore, every pavilion master needs enough luck to bear these karma. You don't have to believe in things like luck and karma, but no one dares to clearly say that it doesn't exist. This is something that can't be seen or touched, but is invisibly destined. In Zhongzhou State, this is called metaphysics. Gu Qingqiu stared at Qin Weibai blankly. Qin Weibai's voice was soft, like a cloud of cold mist that would melt in the wind and snow at any time. Zhongzhou State once had 2 recognized metaphysics grandmasters. They could prove that karma does exist. More than one general or member of parliament had been instructed by them and achieved achievements that others couldn't imagine. When the parliament made some important decisions, they would also ask them what should be paid attention to. Such people are rare in Zhongzhou State. But coincidentally, the monk who raised me was one of them. The whole Zhongzhou State knows that you are the adopted daughter of Great Master Wu Wei. Gu Qingqiu played with the cup in her hand. This is my luck. Qin Weibai nodded. But the whole Zhongzhou State doesn't know that when the Samsara Palace still existed, Xian Xuanzi, a metaphysics grandmaster who was as famous as Great Master Wu Wei, was the 13th supermaster of the Samsara Palace, codenamed Tianji. Gu Qingqiu's hand holding the cup suddenly tightened, and she looked up at Qin Weibai. This is impossible. Qin Weibai didn't speak. Gu Qingqiu sneered. I only know that Xian Xuanzi once called you a demoness who brought disaster to the country and people, and that was before he joined the Samsara Palace. In the last few years of his life, he was the 13th supermaster of the Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai gently raised the corner of her mouth. I sent Xianyan to Kunlun City through Xian Xuanzi. You should know Gu Xingyan very well. He firmly believes in metaphysics. I believe in him very, very much. I can even say that I rely on him. Qin Weibai paused and said meaningfully, without Xian Xuanzi's approval, do you think Gu Xingyan would casually push someone to the position of Pavilion Master of Phoenix Pavilion? Gu Qingqiu's expression changed slightly. He was keenly aware of the meaning contained in Qin Weibai's words. Gu Xianyan was the Phoenix Pavilion Master. She was also the Phoenix Pavilion Master. The expression on Gu Qingqiu's face vanished. She slowly raised her head and looked into Qin Weibai's eyes. What do you mean? Are you interested in Xian Xuanzi? Qin Weibai smiled playfully. Then I'll tell you a story. It's about Xian Xuanzi. The dishes were removed one by one. More than a dozen kinds of exquisite desserts of different colors and shapes were served. Qin Weibai put a piece of soft cake in front of her and said casually, Xian Xuanzi's family can be regarded as a standard metaphysical family. His father, his grandfather, and even those older than him are all engaged in this industry, and they are all people with real talent. Although they have not reached the level of guru, they are not Jianghu swindlers. Their family was very famous for a while, but this kind of fame was not a good thing in a special period that you haven't experienced but have definitely heard of. Xian Xuanzi's father was dragged out and smashed to death with stones and glass on the street. After the family fell, his mother took him to the northwest. During that time, life was very hard. There was a famine, and his mother starved to death. That year, Xian Xuanzi was only 16 years old. He had no family, and the orphanage would not accept children at this age, so he became a homeless child. He went to the northwest, went to the south, drifted in the northeast, and was driven away as a beggar in Yuzhou. When he was at his poorest, he snatched the bread that was bitten by a stray dog on the roadside. He stole wood, worked as a laborer, built a boat, went to jail, and washed dishes for people in restaurants. Before the age of 30, he lived a life where he didn't know the next meal. He couldn't afford to smoke, couldn't drink, and was so fat that others didn't even bother to look at women. He didn't know anything and had no education. Wu Yu from Huating in Yuzhou had been floating around, and couldn't even find a job that could barely support himself. It was not until he was 30 years old that he finally found something that changed his life. When that period of history passed and people no longer felt fear and disgust for metaphysics, he began to tell people's fortunes. His family's knowledge was profound, and he was indeed talented. He was also willing to study Qimeng Duanjia, Tai Chi, 8 diagrams, and a few out-of-print books that he brought back from the ancient wood when he stole wood. He turned them over and over, and the accuracy of his fortune-telling was amazingly high. People began to line up at his fortune-telling stall. Later, he had some money and set up his own studio. The studio became a private numerology consulting company. He finally tasted the taste of women. He got married, had a daughter, and made friends with social celebrities in his eyes. But he chose the wrong side. His company was closed down, he lost all his money, and even his wife died. He became worthless again. After what he had experienced, he didn't want to go back to the days when he didn't have enough to eat. Besides, he still had his daughter to take care of. At that time, Xian Xuanzi wanted to live a better life even in his dreams. Although he had nothing material, he still had some fame. So he wanted to use that fame to find the most powerful backer and a better future for his daughter. So he took his daughter, who was born with the flying phoenix, to Jiangzhou. He wanted to take refuge in the Li family, which was at its peak in Zhongzhou state. Because at that time, everyone knew that the Li family was very particular about these things, and they also had their own metaphysics master, Great Master Wu Wei. But at that time, Li Honghe and the Wang family of Beihai were busy dealing with the Heroes Club, the Jiang family of South America, and the fantasy world's invasion of Zhongzhou state. Moreover, they were close friends with Great Master Wu Wei. How much importance could they attach to a Jianghu fortune teller? Naturally, Xian Xuanzi couldn't see the war god of Zhongzhou state. But the Gu family, the vicious dog beside the Li family at that time, had heard of Xian Xuanzi's fame. The Gu family secretly took in Xian Xuanzi, but they didn't pay too much attention to him. They just kept him as a secret guest and didn't see him on various occasions. But his daughter, who had a noble birth destiny at that time, blended well in the Gu family. His daughter was very beautiful. Although she was still young at that time, she already had the shadow of a stunning beauty. It was easy to attract Gu Xingyun and even Gu Qianchuan, who were also young at that time. But Xian Xuanzi, who was not valued, was not reconciled. So when he met with the core figures of the Gu family, he threw out the heavyweight bargaining chip that he had intended to give to the Li family. Qin Weibai's voice paused and she took a bite of the cake. Gu Qingqiu, who was a little absorbed, said subconsciously, "What bargaining chip? Have you heard of the Heshibi?" Qin Weibai smiled. "Or it could be the Imperial Jade Seal." Gu Qingqiu's breath stopped slightly. Xian Xuanzi had the clue of the Imperial Jade Seal. From the perspective of metaphysics, it could represent the fate of Zhongzhou State to a certain extent, second only to the legendary dragon vein of Zhongzhou State. Not only Xian Xuanzi, but even the Gu family at that time thought that it was the key to their rise. The Gu family did touch the Heshibi according to the clue given by Xian Xuanzi, but because of some accident, the Heshibi was lost. If the Heshibi was not lost, from the perspective of metaphysics, the current Gu family might really be extremely powerful. But although the Gu family did not get the Heshibi, Xian Xuanzi's daughter was highly valued by the Gu family. Qin Weibai looked at Gu Qingqiu. Do you know why? Because according to Xian Xuanzi, the clue of the Heshibi was deduced by him from his daughter's birth chart. There is no way to find out whether this is true or not, but Xian Xuanzi's daughter was carefully trained by the Gu family to cultivate her martial arts. They cultivated her talents and her logic of thinking. She grew up silently in the Gu family and became more and more dazzling. At the same time, she got closer and closer to the genius of the Gu family, Gu Xingyun. They loved each other at that time, but when Gu Xingyun's parents were about to formally propose to Xian Xuanzi's daughter met another man. In other words, she met the master of the Gu family at that time. Well, the master is not very accurate. It should be the young master of the Gu family. Gu Qingqiu's body shook. She vaguely knew who Xian Xuanzi's daughter was in Qin Weibai's story, but she couldn't believe it. Li Guangtu, the young master of the Li family, fell in love with the girl who had already fallen in love with Gu Xingyun at first sight, and made his own request to the Gu family on the spot. At that time, Gu Xingyun's bloodline was not the orthodox of the Gu family. The leader was Gu Qianchuan's bloodline. At that time, the Gu family was still a loyal dog to the Li family. On the one hand, it was their master, and on the other hand, it was a talented child of their own. Of course, the Gu family knew how to choose. They suppressed Gu Xingyun and Xian Xuanzi, and sent his daughter to Li Guangtu. Later, Gu Xingyun endured for several years and found an opportunity to successfully take the leadership of the Gu family. However, Gu Xingyun, who controlled the Gu family, was still not qualified to take back the girl who had already belonged to Li Guangtu. He didn't know who to hate, especially after he found that the girl he loved was becoming more and more indifferent to him, but became more and more gentle and considerate to Li Guangtu. He wanted to kill Li Guangtu, wanted to overthrow the Li family, wanted to get that girl, wanted revenge and loved her very much. But he hated her very much. So he imprisoned the girl's father, imprisoned Xian Xuanzi, and threatened the girl to reveal Li Guangtu's various movements and martial arts progress to him. Later, he became more and more excessive, and began to try to control Li Guangtu's various behaviors through the girl. It was also during that time that Kunlun City began to cultivate all kinds of excellent and beautiful young women, quietly placing them around the important figures of the Li family. Resources were constantly mobilized, and more departments were set up. The means of cultivating excellent young women became more and more professional, which also meant that the management began to become troublesome. Kunlun City put together this set of system for cultivating young girls, and officially named it Phoenix Pavilion. Xian Xuanzi's daughter, the girl who succeeded in making Li Guangtu fall in love, became the first pavilion master of Phoenix Pavilion. Gu Qingqiu held her cheeks and listened attentively, as if she was really listening to a story, but her eyes were twinkling. This was definitely not Xian Xuanzi's original intention, Qin Weibai said. Seeing his daughter involved in the storm between the Li family and the Gu family, and could be torn apart at any time, as a father, of course, he was not reconciled and of course he wanted to do something. When Gu Xingyun was torturing him once, he told Gu Xingyun that their plan wasn't perfect. They should be looking for a beautiful woman with the fate of 100 tigers to be placed by Li Guangtu's side. The 100 tigers were fierce, far more suitable to carry out the Gu family's plan than his daughter's flying phoenix fate. He wanted to find a girl with the birth destiny of 100 tigers to replace his daughter. At the very least, he wanted to put her and his woman beside Li Guangtu at the same time to find a suitable scapegoat. Gu Qingqiu's body suddenly trembled, as if she had been electrocuted. Her ruddy face instantly turned pale. Qin Weibai's voice continued, but the unhurried tone seemed to gradually add a touch of cruelty and sharpness. Gu Xingyun agreed to this plan. He fed Xian Xuanzi the Gu family's unique poison, and let him out of the Gu family. It was at that time that he, who originally had his own name, became the real Xian Xuanzi. He was responsible for secretly collecting all kinds of girls who met the requirements of Phoenix Pavilion for the Gu family. With the support of the Gu family's resources, Xian Xuanzi's activities in the outside world could be said to be flourishing. Metaphysics Grandmaster? What is a metaphysics grandmaster? With the cooperation of a big force behind him, he can mobilize all kinds of resources, he has real talent, and he can achieve the effect of turning stone into gold in the shortest time. With many such examples, he naturally becomes a metaphysics grandmaster. This is a method of hyping up fame. The only thing needed is that the hyped object has real talent. So in those years, Xian Xuanzi became more and more famous. More than half of the upper class of Zhongzhou State had heard of his fame, and his reputation began to catch up with great master Wu Wei. Xian Xuanzi began to be often invited to the homes of some social celebrities, and even participated in some charity activities and various banquets. He came into contact with more and more people. During that period, his name was extremely famous. Zhongzhou State even set off a metaphysics craze because of the existence of him and great master Wu Wei. It's just that Xian Xuanzi's heart has always been very uneasy. He became successful and got everything he once dreamed of, but he never found the birth destiny of 100 tigers, and he had the luck to save his daughter's goal. Until he received an invitation. That year, Xian Xuanzi was still in Huiting, but he received an invitation from Linen. The inviter was a local wealthy family in Jiangxia, with a large business and a great reputation in the clothing and retail industry. The businessman wanted to invest in other fields, so he wanted to find Xian Xuanzi to consult about his luck in the next few years. Xian Xuanzi was invited to Linen. The patriarch of the small wealthy family was very sincere, and held a welcome banquet for Xian Xuanzi. It was at that banquet that he saw a little girl. The girl was about 7 or 8 years old at that time, but she had already shown an extraordinary demeanor. She was as fair as jade, could play the piano, draw, understand poetry, and was very good at playing the violin. The girl at that time was probably equivalent to the fairy face of a few years ago. No matter where she came from, as long as people saw her, they could see the kind of light shining in her. Xian Xuanzi was overjoyed, because that girl was the one he had been looking for a long time. The one who could replace his daughter. He could see the girl's birth destiny and the huge luck in her that was enough to make his family prosper. So when the businessman asked him alone after the banquet, Xian Xuanzi gave his own answer. The businessman asked about his luck in the next 3 years. At that time, Xian Xuanzi's answer was that he would soar to the sky in 3 years. But no one knew that his answer was actually only half a sentence. Then he left Lin and returned to Kunlun City overnight. After meeting Gu Xingyun, he told Gu Xingyun the half sentence that he didn't tell the businessman. 3 years later, his family would be ruined. Da-da-da. There was a slight sound in the hall. Gu Qingqiu, whose face was pale without a trace of blood, held the cup tightly with her slender fingers. The cup trembled slightly on the table. Qin Weibai's voice was still calm and a little cold. Behind every metaphysics grandmaster, there is absolutely powerful capital power, so they have the ability to turn stone into gold in the eyes of others. Gu Xingyun began to mobilize all kinds of resources. Within 3 years, the businessman who invited Xian Xuanzi to Lin, and was really successful. His assets doubled and he was in the limelight. Such development made Xian Xuanzi famous, and also made him the businessman's guest of honor. He often went back and forth to Lin, and secretly observed the growth of the girl. The girl became more and more amazing. It took Xian Xuanzi 3 years to determine the target. So in order to prove the second half of his sentence, a large amount of capital of Gu's surged in, and almost destroyed most of the businessman's assets overnight. This was done very cleverly, almost without anyone noticing. Goose made full use of several competitors of the businessman, and completely ruined the businessman's group. From the beginning to the end, not to mention the businessman, even the competitors who were used as pawns didn't know the existence of Goose. The bankrupt businessman was burdened with huge debts. All his properties and cars were sold, and his family lived on the streets. The businessman couldn't bear the huge pressure, and jumped into the lake by the West Lake. His body was found a few days later. When the businessman's wife saw her husband's body, she completely collapsed and naturally went crazy. She was sent to the cheapest mental hospital by the local city government, and died a month later. The cause of death is still unknown. And the girl who showed dazzling brilliance, who was originally loved new dance and music, new poetry and painting, and was the focus of everyone's attention, was only 11 years old. She wandered on the streets for about 3 months. In the summer, she didn't change a dirty dress. She went to the trash can for food, drank the water of the West Lake, slept in the subway station, and on the park bench. The relatives who sympathized with the girl and wanted to pick her up had inexplicable accidents. More than one thirsty tramp wanted to take her home and collect her, but all of them died inexplicably. Because the girl was herself a prey. The hunter in the dark forced her father to die, killed her mother, killed all the relatives who wanted to adopt her, and killed all the people who had bad intentions towards her. The hunter wanted the girl to live in the most desperate environment, and the most difficult life. Qin Weibai looked at Gu Qingqiu, who seemed to be about to faint at any time, and her voice was as cold as a knife. Because that was the only way to save her before the hunter took action. When she survived, she knew how to be grateful. Isn't this an unforgettable kindness? Jiang Nishang, do you agree with this statement? It's impossible, it's impossible. Gu Qingqiu kept shaking her head. At this moment, she was like a puppet who had lost her soul. Her eyes were chaotic to the extreme, and she had lost all ability to respond. Let's continue to tell this story. Qin Weibai smiled. The hunter let the girl live for more than 3 months in the most desperate days. Then, he created a coincidence and let the girl appear in front of him. He was very kind and gave her a chance to talk to him. What did an 11-year-old girl know? She didn't have a sound outlook on life and values. How could she know who destroyed her family? The only thing she knew was the names of a few of her father's competitors. She wanted revenge. This was human instinct. And the kind hunter did catch several competitors of the girl's father. He took them to the depths of the West Lake, where the girl's father jumped into the lake, and gave the girl a short knife. The hunter just watched the girl cut her enemies until they bled and couldn't breathe. He gave the girl her first lesson, and she learned what ruthlessness was. The hunter took the girl to a secret base, made her forget her name, and gave her a new name, Qingqiu. The girl was originally a daughter of a rich family. She had a good foundation, and her age was just right. She received all kinds of training, which could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. The hunter's ambition was to train the girl into the most perfect woman. But before the girl grew up, in fact, not long after the girl entered the secret base, the Gu family found a great opportunity to completely overthrow their master. But they still didn't give up on training the girl. It seemed that they had tasted the sweetness, so they did their best to train her. They spent 10 years creating a woman they thought was perfect. After completing the most difficult step, the girl appeared next to the youngest deputy speaker of Zhongzhou state at that time with little effort. The people of Phoenix Pavilion thought that not many people could resist the girl's charm. And it was true. The 21-year-old girl easily took the hand of the ambitious deputy speaker, went to his bed, and was carefully protected by him like a treasure. That year, the girl was 21 years old, and her hunting target was 35 years old. That was the 10th year after she entered Kunlun City. The girl spent the first 5 years with the hunting target and watched him become the mayor of Huading, a big international city, from the deputy speaker. In the second 5 years, she watched him become the speaker of a province from the mayor of Huading. In the third 5 years, she came to Yuzhou and Ah and took control of the Ministry of Personnel. The third 5 years was coming to an end. She watched him stabilize his position as the crown prince. At that time, The girl was no longer young, but she was still spoiled by him. For 15 years, she didn't know whether she fell in love with him or not. But no matter whether she did or not, she didn't think it mattered. Because in her heart, he was just her hunting target. Maybe she had feelings for him, or maybe it was very deep. But no matter what, it couldn't be compared to her unforgettable gratitude to the hunter. She just hoped that time could go faster, to the most critical point, to do what she wanted to do, and then get a sum of money, go to the country she had been looking forward to for half of her life to settle down, leave Zhongzhou State, and never come back. Then at the end of the third 5 years, she received an inexplicable invitation. She came to this private palace called Homeland, and watched the woman tell her a story. Qin Weibai picked up the newly changed orange juice, poured herself a glass, and drank half of it in one gulp. She rarely spoke so much, so she soon felt tired. Gu Qingqiu's eyes were a little crazy, sitting in the same place motionless. The atmosphere was almost suffocating. Qin Weibai was giving her time to react. Gu Xianyan had always been an honest child. She blinked and looked at Gu Qingqiu, holding her cheeks. There was some sympathy in her big eyes and she said crisply, "You are so poor." "No," Gu Qingqiu said softly. She shook her head hard and desperately. "No, not me." Her movements were getting bigger and bigger. All her emotions completely broke out at this moment. Gu Qingqiu suddenly screamed, stood up, and directly overturned the table in front of her. She screamed, "It's not me, it's not me." Countless desserts flew in the air. Qin Weibai seemed to have been prepared. She tapped the ground with one leg, and her chair moved back all the way to the French window. Outside the window, the snow was flying, and it was pure white, as if heaven and earth were hanging upside down. Qin Weibai waved her hand. The security guards and waiters who had rushed out paused, and all carefully retreated, looking at Gu Qingqiu with vigilance. Qin Weibai was still sitting in the chair, legs crossed, cold and proud, looking down. "This is not true. You lied to me." Gu Qingqiu stared at Qin Weibai. "Why did you lie to me?" She seemed to want to rush over desperately, but she gritted her teeth and restrained herself. "It's just a story," Qin Weibai said faintly. Gu Qingqiu's excited emotions suddenly stagnated, and her whole person seemed to be stunned. She stood there blankly, and tears welled up in her eyes. After a while she said hoarsely, "Why did you tell this story?" "I respect the truth. There is no fabrication in the story. If you really take the story as a story, maybe you can ask Hunter why he made up this story." "I don't believe it." Gu Qingqiu gritted her teeth and sneered. "You are sowing discord. You want to provoke the relationship between me and Gu Xingyun, right? Are you afraid that he will ruin your plan? So you stab him in the back, right? I know you are a terrible woman, and the whole Zhongzhou state knows it. But do you think I will be fooled? I don't believe it. I don't believe a word you say." Qin Weibai turned her chair and looked out of the window at the quiet and snow-white West Mountain. In Gu Qingqiu's eyes, there was a perfect dream, but extremely sharp and indifferent side face. "Then you can go." Qin Weibai had no intention of persuading Gu Qingqiu. "Goodbye." Neat and tidy. Gu Qingqiu froze in place again. She breathed quickly, and her chest kept rising and falling. She was silent. The silent stalemate lasted for 5 minutes. Qin Weibai turned her head and looked at her. "Are you waiting for me to treat you to afternoon tea?" "I don't believe it." Gu Qingqiu muttered to herself and shook her head. Tears kept gushing out of her eyes and falling to the ground. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want me to do?" "You have the right not to believe it. This is your freedom," Qin Weibai said softly. "I just treat you as a friend, so I tell you this. I have fulfilled my obligation. As for what you want to do, you have received the most professional training, and you don't need me to teach you. You cannot believe it. Leave here now, and I will pretend that we have never met, and I can promise not to do anything. You can also choose to doubt and ask me to provide evidence." Qin Weibai took out her limited edition Hermes black and white handbag, and took out a USB flash drive from it. Gu Xianyan came over and took the USB flash drive. "This is the evidence you want. Things were done very cleanly that year, so even this evidence can't directly prove anything. However, The information in this contains a lot of things. As long as you are not stupid, you can probably speculate the truth of the matter, and even continue to investigate. You are not the only one in the information. There are a few others whose situations are similar to yours. I am not familiar with them. What you want to do is entirely up to you. Gu Xianyan walked to Gu Qingqiu and handed over the USB flash drive in her hand. Gu Qingqiu looked at the black USB flash drive with fear, and subconsciously took a step back. Qin Weibai looked at her quietly and said nothing. After a long time, Gu Qingqiu carefully reached out and took the USB flash drive. She clenched her fists tightly as if she was holding a mountain. Why do you know this? Gu Qingqiu's mouth moved. And those things about me? It doesn't matter. Qin Weibai laughed. Her laughter was a little soft, with a little relief. The important thing is that the contents of the USB flash drive can guarantee the authenticity of the story I told. Gu Qingqiu was silent for a moment and said hoarsely, I'm leaving. Goodbye. Qin Weibai did not get up and nodded. Gu Qingqiu turned and left. Her body was shaking, and she was lost. Gu Xianyan looked at her back and said with some doubt in her voice, Sister, her reaction is very strange. Isn't it exciting enough? Qin Weibai smiled and sent Gu Qingqiu away. After eating her fill, she was as languid as a cat, languid and lazy. Gu Xianyan nodded hard. Don't underestimate her. Qin Weibai said softly. This is a person who has received the most professional training in all aspects. In a sense, it can even be said to be the ultimate version of you. Her current situation may be the direction you want to grow in Kunlun City's eyes. She is definitely a master in controlling her own emotions. In fact, I was a little surprised that she could have the reaction just now. What will she do next? Gu Xianyan seemed to start imagining. Gu Qingqiu, Cheng Shilai Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun. This was definitely the core bomb of Kunlun City. If it exploded at this time, what would the consequences be? What effect could it have on the current situation? Do what she should do, such as change her fate. Qin Weibai's voice was a little vague. She looked through the window at Gu Qingqiu's graceful back that was about to disappear. She didn't tell her why she knew so much. In fact, it really didn't matter. The other Qin Weibai had thought of these things in her mind, so Qin Weibai also knew. In the time and space that she didn't know was the past or the future, Qin Weibai had heard the story she had just told Gu Qingqiu. Gu Xingyun told her the story himself. That was after the siege of the snowy night in that time and space. She knelt beside Dongqing Huangtu's body and held his body, which was colder than ice and snow, in her arms. Gu Xingyun stood beside her and said this story in a cold and happy voice, telling the idea that those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. At that time, Gu Qingqiu had died. His bones were cold. Qin Weibai didn't tell Gu Qingqiu that everything she was doing now was actually meaningless, because even in the end, until she completed the task ahead of time, she never got the money promised by Gu Xingyun, nor did she go to Switzerland that she wanted to forget for many years, nor did she pick up the camera and travel around the world. Gu Xingyun would not allow her, who knew too much to survive. Death was an inevitable situation. She once wore a small and exquisite mask, and lived with Gu Qingqiu in a luxurious villa as his cousin. She slept on the same bed, met Qing Shilai's brother-in-law, went to the university town in Yuzhou, ate stinky tofu that cost 15 yuan a night together, sweated like rain in the tennis court of a private club, and shared the most private things between them. She watched her kill her boyfriend who wanted to threaten her at the age of 37. They cried, laughed, played, looked forward to the future together, and felt melancholy together. They were the best friends. They used to be. The wind and snow were like a curtain. Gu Qingqiu's figure turned through the moon gate, and completely disappeared in the messy snow curtain. Goodbye. Qin Weibai whispered softly. When Gu Xianyan turned to find dessert, her long sigh seemed to pass through thousands of years of time. Teacher. Chapter 12:21. When it was late at night in Zhongzhou State, it was already morning in the Slankov Islands of Snow Country. The Slankov Islands were located in the northwest of Snow Country, close to the polar circle. It was a world of ice and snow and sparsely populated. A dozen islands of different sizes floated on the surface of the Arctic Ocean, covered with thick snow, like glaciers floating in the sea. The total land area of the Slanka Islands was less than 6,000 square kilometers. There were no tourist attractions or rich resources. The development was backward and the population was sparse. Not to mention the world, even in snow country, many people had never heard of this place. To be exact, this was the situation of the Slanka Islands more than 2 years ago. Today, more than 2 years later, there were still many people in snow country who had never heard of this place. But in the dark world, it could be regarded as famous and even well known. 1 month ago, that was when the final battle in Beihai had just ended. Snow country officially granted the Slanka Islands a new name. The name Slanka Islands completely became the name of the Lee family. This remote but indeed located in the hinterland of snow country was officially renamed the Dawn Islands. About 16,000 people from snow country were relocated to the Dawn Islands. The Aurora Legion entered the Dawn Islands in a high-profile manner. At the same time, it completely appeared in the sight of all the forces in the Dark World, and stepped onto the world stage. Snow Country's Grizzly Bear Mercenary Corps, Cold Fire Mercenary Corps, Flying Bird, Wind and Snow Embrace, Cold Sword, more than 20 famous dark forces in Snow Country announced that they would become the vassals of the Aurora Legion at the same time. The Aurora Legion began to expand as soon as it officially appeared. In just 1 month, the dark forces in the 3 small countries around Snow Country were wiped out. As soon as the order of the local special warfare system collapsed, the Aurora Legion, which had entered in a high-profile manner, took over the position of the special warfare center of the 3 countries in the shortest time. The Aurora Legion's invincible conqueror path encountered strong resistance when it was cleaning up Reki City. Maybe it was not cleaning up. It was just a test. And the Aurora Legion's test also got the desired result. Hundreds of elites, including an expert at the peak of the Thundershocking realm, were all wiped out. The Snowdance Corps rushed directly into Snow Country. Within 48 hours, they continuously cleaned up 4 bases of the Aurora Legion before slowing down. However, it was only a matter of slowing down. The conflict between the Snowdance Corps and the Aurora Legion continued. At the border between the 2 forces, there were conflicts and provocations almost every day. The changing times continued throughout the world. Since the fall of the Polar Ground Alliance, the Aurora Legion had become a new superpower in Snow Country in the eyes of the people in the Dark World. Perhaps its comprehensive strength was not as good as that of the Polar Ground Alliance, but it was not far behind. They already had the Dawn Islands as their foundation, and they also had experts at the peak of the Invincible Realm guarding them. Now they took root in Snow Country, and were rapidly expanding toward the entire eastern part of the European continent. The former superpowers had fallen apart, and new superpowers were constantly rising. Everyone believed that within 10 years, the Aurora Legion could surpass the former Polar Ground Alliance and become the strongest superpower in the eastern part of the European continent. Excluding the vassals, there were not many official members of the Aurora Legion. There were less than 50,000 people, and about 1/5 of them were in the logistics department. There were only 37,000 true warriors. But it was these less than 40,000 soldiers that intimidated the over 300,000 soldiers of the vassal forces, controlled the special warfare system of the entire Snow Empire, and became the heart of all the dark forces of the Snow Empire. The reason? The reason was not only that their leader was Wang Xiaoyao, an expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm. At the same time, they were part of the North Sea Legion, and it could be said that they were the most elite forces in the Legion. An expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm. For deputy commanders of the half-step Invincible Realm. 12 experts at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. Nearly 50 experts in the Thundershocking Realm. More than 5,000 experts in the Fire-Flaming Realm. Nearly 20,000 experts in the Ice-Condensing Realm. Within the Aurora Legion, the weakest one had entered the threshold of the Chi-Controlling Realm, one of the 4 realms of martial arts. This was an army whose average strength was at the peak of the Ice-Condensing Realm. They were invincible, and had almost no shortcomings. Even in the whole world, only the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State could be compared with the Aurora Legion in terms of comprehensive strength. This army of nearly 50,000 was the carefully selected elites of the North Sea Legion. They were taken to Snow Country during the chaos in Snow Country. After the chaos ended, they were all detained by Wang Xiaoyao until today. For more than 2 years, the 50,000 army, which had existed in the name of the North Sea Legion, was not peaceful. Loyalty to Mount Dibbing and loyalty to Wang Xiaoyao were two different concepts in many people's minds. Wang Xiaoyao controlled the situation and had been quietly changing the blood. Today, among the 12 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the Aurora Legion, 7 of them were from Snow Country and had nothing to do with the North Sea Legion. 3 of them were from the former Polar Ground Alliance. This was the case for the high-level members of the Legion, let alone the shuffling of the middle and high-level members. In the name of the Wang family of Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao led 50,000 troops to conquer the dark world of Snow Country. After subduing these forces, he placed them inside the 50,000 troops. Day after day, he changed the inner direction of these 50,000 people little by little. This process was destined not to be easy. Many diehard supporters of Mount Dibbing gradually disappeared within 2 years. New forces joined in and moved faster and faster. In more than 2 years, Wang Xiaoyao finally took initial control of the situation and barely turned the 50,000 most elite forces into his own. So after the final battle of Beihai, Wang Xiaoyao officially moved the headquarters of the North Sea Legion in Snow Country and stationed it in the Dawn Islands. The North Sea Legion was officially renamed as the Aurora Legion. After more than 2 years of dormancy and management, from that moment on, Wang Xiaoyao, who had stepped into the peak of the invincible realm, completely straightened out the forces in his hands. The 50,000 Aurora Legion had also parted ways with the North Sea Legion and became a sharp sword in his hands. For the Wang family of Beihai, this was undoubtedly a huge blow. It meant that Wang Xiaoyao had completely betrayed Mount Dibbing and taken away a part of the core strength of the North Sea Legion. The North Sea Legion, which had always been regarded as the biggest reliance of the Wang family of Beihai, was greatly weakened. Although they were still recruiting and expanding, there was no doubt that the loss of the 50,000 elites meant that they had lost the competitiveness to compete with the Border Control Corps for the #1 army in the world. The entire North Sea province was in an uproar. Wang Xiaoyao became a traitor that everyone in Beihai had to kill. More than one sword-holding family even claimed that Wang Xiaoyao was the biggest traitor and shame in the history of Beihai for hundreds of years, because he had split the core strength of Beihai. Mount Dibbing had been silent. However, the core members of the Wang family of Beihai, led by Wang Shengxiao, had begun to discuss the sanctions against the Aurora Legion. Wang Xiaoyao was still calm and collected. He occupied the dark world of Snow Country. After drawing a clear line with the Wang family of Beihai, he seemed to have reached a consensus in the long negotiations with Snow Country. There was no doubt that Snow Country wanted to control the Aurora Legion to serve them. Even when the Polar Ground Alliance existed, Snow Country didn't have its own experts at the peak of the invincible realm. If Wang Xiaoyao could completely rely on them, it would definitely be a pleasant surprise. It was just that they didn't look good, but they had a beautiful dream. Wang Xiaoyao didn't mind doing something for Snow Country, but he couldn't become a sword in the hands of Snow Country. The Aurora Legion expanded in the eastern part of the European continent as a free force. Similar to the Jiang family and the Heroes Club in South America, they had reached a certain degree of cooperation with Snow Country. But the first thing they considered was the core interests of the Aurora Legion. This completely exposed Wang Xiaoyao's wild ambition. It also made the nature of the Aurora Legion completely different from the forces such as Kunlun City of Zhongzhou State, the Men in Black of Star State, and the Shadow Throne of the European Alliance. In a short time, Snow Country could only accept such conditions. Fortunately, there was still a long time. They wouldn't give up on subduing the Aurora Legion, and the Aurora Legion wouldn't let down its guard. This long game of seesaw warfare would not end. But this situation was enough for the Aurora Legion to gain a foothold in the Dawn Islands. As soon as the cooperation was established, Snow Country began to provide a large number of armaments for the Aurora Legion. Snow Country's economy was very poor, but it was an old powerhouse in terms of armaments. Maybe there was a gap between it and Star State in some high-end armaments, but a large number of medium and high-end armaments were not bad at all. It was enough to arm the Aurora Legion to the teeth. This could be said to be Snow Country's sincerity, and it was also a bargaining chip that moved Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao kept a straight face and accepted all the armaments, but he didn't reveal anything. For more than 2 years, he spent most of his time with his legion. Except for a trip to Zhongzhou State during the decisive battle in Beihai, he basically didn't leave. His life was a bit regular. The only person who could disturb his rest on weekdays was probably his closest ally, Wang Qinglei, who kept in touch with him all the time. Wang Qinglei's call came when Wang Xiaoyao was dreaming. In the dream, he once again dreamed of the woman who was almost engraved in his soul. He was confessing to her and even wanted to hold her hand. All dreams seem to be like this. Just as he was about to touch that hand, the phone suddenly rang. Wang Xiaoyao opened his eyes. There was no anger, no unwillingness. The picture in the dream was still echoing in his mind in reality. It was a pair of quiet but bright eyes that bloomed with stars all over the sky, looking at him quietly. He looked at the palm he stretched out in front of him. After all, it was just a dream. The air was a little heavy. Wang Xiaoyao's heart was filled with melancholy, depression, and a trace of pain. He sat up on the bed, pursed his lips, and took out his mobile phone to look at the number. He got out of bed, took the remote control on the bed at random, and clicked on the TV screen in front of him. Wang Qinglei's phone number appeared on the TV screen. Wang Xiaoyao answered the phone and looked at Wang Qinglei's figure on the screen. He was silent. He whispered, "What about rest?" Wang Qinglei looked at Wang Xiaoyao's somewhat absent-minded state and said with a smile, "I envy you. Although you were busy in the past 2 years, you began to relax after that period. Now the situation in Snow Country is stable. You can come to Wuyue when you have time. Last night, I drank with Mellow Light and talked a lot about you. It was very interesting. Next time you come, I'll prepare something good for you." Wang Xiaoyao was indeed a lot more relaxed now. He didn't have to work hard to hold the 50,000 troops in his hand, and didn't dare to leave Snow Country. As for the expansion in the Dark World in the eastern part of the European continent, he didn't need to do anything. Now he was the only expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm in the eastern part of the European continent, and also the only expert of the Invincible Realm. Unless it was a special situation, he didn't need to do anything at all. The 4 deputy commanders of the half-step Invincible Realm of the Aurora Legion could each take charge of a region on their own in this land. Even the 12 experts at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm under their command could hardly meet any decent opponents. At present, only the most elite force of the Border Control Corps could match the 50,000 elites in the world. They were expanding unhurriedly in the eastern part of the European continent. The speed was indeed not fast, but it was extremely steady. Their only opponent was the Snowdance Corps, which was entrenched in the territory of the 5 countries led by Reki City. There were only more than 10,000 people in the Snowdance Corps. At present, there were still 5,000 people in the territory of the Dark Knights in the northern part of the European continent. But these 10,000 people were all from the Thunderbolt Battalion of the Border Control Corps, and their frontal combat capability was no worse than that of the Aurora Legion. At present, although there were occasional frictions between the 2 armies, they both restrained themselves. The Snowdance Corps didn't want to drive Wang Xiaoyao into a corner and kill him. An expert at the peak of the Invincible Realm could play a decisive role in a battle of 10,000 people. No one wanted to force him into a desperate situation. Of course, Wang Xiaoyao would not be so stupid as to take the initiative to attack the Snowdance Corps. The whole world knew that the Snowdance Corps was afraid of Wang Xiaoyao now, because Li Tianlan didn't have time to care about him. Now Emperor Dong's palace already had a plan to expand and establish a dynasty all over the world. America, East Island, Europe, Zhongzhou State, Tiannan, and a beautiful land. The 5 countries of Reki City, where the Snowdance Corps was stationed, were very mature in all aspects and could generate endless profits every year. This huge profit had played a role as a lubricant, nourishing the relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the giant group. Therefore, now Emperor Dong's palace was expanding, but Reki City had to be stable. When the situation of Emperor Dong's palace took shape and Li Tianlan was free, the Aurora Legion and Wang Xiaoyao would be nothing. Wang Xiaoyao naturally knew this, but he also didn't dare to provoke Li Tianlan. This was the most aggrieved thing in his heart. But even so, he didn't give up the development of the Aurora Legion. Emperor Dong's palace needed to expand, and it took time to do so. According to Wang Xiaoyao's estimation, it would take at least 10 years for Emperor Dong's palace to become a dynasty. What would happen to the Aurora Legion after 10 years? Wang Xiaoyao thought that he had a chance. Therefore, the situation with the Snowdance Corps was in a stalemate. The Aurora Legion expanded in other directions. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were more focused on Zhongzhou State. The election this time also affected his nerves. Whether Wang Qinglei could soar to the sky or not was related to their plan. It was also related to how much support the Aurora Legion could get from Zhongzhou State in the future. Wang Xiaoyao opened the drawer under the tea table, took out a cigar and lit it. He said in a low voice, "What's the matter?" Wang Qinglei froze for a moment and seemed to see that Wang Xiaoyao was in a bad mood. He didn't talk nonsense and said directly, "Wenwen just left me." When Wang Xiaoyao looked up, Ji Wenjiang. His eyes narrowed subconsciously. The election was coming. The current flag figure of the Southeast Group, the director of Zhongzhou State, and the Minister of Supervision suddenly went to Wuyue without any news beforehand. What was he going to do? His nerves tightened. He quickly suppressed the drowsiness and the images in his dream. He said in a low voice, "Inspection?" "Inspect what?" "Wuyue has been developing steadily in the past few years. What needs the director of the Ministry of Supervision to come down and inspect?" Chen Fangqing came to Wuyue just before he died. Wang Qinglei snorted and suddenly sneered. "I think he wants to start a fire. Can he stand it?" Wang Xiaoyao thought and asked quickly. "It's hard to say. As long as you dig deep, there will be more or less problems in any place." Wang Qinglei said with a solemn expression, "I'm afraid that Guofeng is going to leave in advance. He has bad intentions." Wang Xiaoyao's body tightened slightly. Mu Guofeng was one of the directors of Wuyue and the Minister of Supervision. Ji Wenjiang could be said to be his immediate superior. The personnel of the Ministry of Supervision had its own system. If Ji Wenjiang transferred Mu Guofeng, what position would he arrange for him? Mu Guofeng could be said to be Wang Qinglei's confidant. He had always been in line with Wang Qinglei. If he was transferred at this time, if the position was not ideal, it would undoubtedly tell the whole Wuyue that the Southeast Group had made up its mind. Whoever they wanted to touch, Wang Qinglei could not be protected at all. If things developed to this point, Wang Qinglei would undoubtedly be in danger. At this time, it was time for Wang Qinglei to fully control Wuyue. This was a big gift to the Prince Group in exchange for his further progress. If he could not control Wuyue, this big gift could easily become a huge bomb. The final position of Mu Guofeng was just the first problem. The second problem was who would take over Mu Guofeng's position after he left. Ji Wenjiang personally took action. The new candidate was very likely to be a bomb that the Southeast Group intended to blow Wang Qinglei out of Wuyue. If this candidate could not be controlled, for Wang Qinglei, he could be in trouble at any time. So now Wang Qinglei still looked calm and composed, but his situation had become somewhat embarrassing. When facing Li Huaqing and Chen Fangqing, Beihai and the Southeast Group had no time to care about them. They could only let them stir up trouble and poach many of their people. They even sent Dijiang, an expert of the Invincible Realm, to Beihai prison. That was completely helpless. In the face of huge external pressure, they could only try their best to stabilize the internal situation. After the final battle of Beihai, although the Wang family of Beihai suffered extremely heavy losses, with the rise of Wang Shengxiao and Li Tianlan, and the death of Chen Fangqing, the Wang family of Beihai had recovered. Without external pressure, they naturally had to deal with the internal traitors. Wang Qinglei, Wang Xiaoyao, they all had to be dealt with sooner or later. Now Wang Qinglei's situation was extremely delicate, and even his current competitors were not very clear. The one in Sinan City was Wang Qinglei's opponent, but only in the context of the Prince Group. And as a director, his biggest opponent was Yi Dongsheng. On the other hand, he also wanted to fight for the position that Wen Siyuan and Hua Xingyang were competing for. At this time, Wang Qinglei was extremely cautious in every step he took. Ji Wenzhong's sudden arrival in Wuyue made Wang Qinglei a little uneasy. Don't worry too much about Guofeng. I have communicated with Guo Wentian. He will deal with Guofeng's whereabouts. Wang Qinglei said slowly. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes and understood what Wang Qinglei meant. The other party hoped that he would operate on the candidate to replace Mu Guofeng. It was impossible for Wang Qinglei to get help from the Southeast group at present. But Wang Xiaoyao was different. Even if he was also notorious in the Wang family of Beihai, after all, he was Wang Tianzong's biological brother and had a wide network. Some old people in the Southeast group liked him very much. Wang Qinglei hoped to use Wang Xiaoyao's power to interfere with the candidate to replace Mu Guofeng. At least he had to give it a try. Got it. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. I will set off for Zhongzhou State as soon as possible. Wang Qinglei replied with a hum and rubbed his forehead tiredly. It was obviously another sleepless night for him. He smiled tiredly. That's it. We'll talk about the details when you come. Wang Xiaoyao replied with a hum and hung up the communication. He sat on the sofa in silence, smoking a cigar. All kinds of thoughts kept flashing in his mind. In any case, one thing was certain. It was his inevitable choice to ensure the stability of Wuyue. Similarly, Wang Xiaoyao had to work hard to push Wang Qinglei to go further. Ji Wenzhong lit a flame. And now Wang Xiaoyao was going to completely extinguish this flame. Who was more suitable to replace Mu Guofeng? Who should he find to operate on this matter? Wang Xiaoyao's eyes gradually became clear. He stood up and planned to go for breakfast. It was already morning. However, the Dawn Islands were still pitch black in the polar night. Wang Xiaoyao looked at the night outside and reached out for his mobile phone. His cell phone rang the moment he took it in his hand. It was a phone number that he had saved in his address book, but he had never called before. Wang Xiaoyao's expression was extremely obvious for a moment. This was a call from the Snowdance Corps. To be exact, it was a call from Li Tianying, the deputy commander of the Snowdance Corps. Wang Xiaoyao held the phone and lowered his head to think. He didn't answer the phone immediately, and his expression looked extremely cautious. He didn't know what this call meant. Although they were in a stalemate with the other party, they had always maintained a little restraint and even made concessions. If Eagle King's call was the ultimatum of Emperor Dong's palace, what should he do? Wang Xiaoyao thought a lot in an instant. He was actually no stranger to Eagle King. In more than 2 years in Snow Country, he had never had any direct contact with the old man of the Li family, nor had he talked to him. It was just that when he first arrived in Reki City, Wang Xiaoyao had met him once, so naturally he couldn't say much. Apart from that first meeting, it was more than 20 years ago if they were to go back further. At that time, Wang Xiaoyao was still a teenager, about 11 or 12 years old. In his memory he seemed to have hugged him. Wang Xiaoyao was a little troubled. Eagle King, whether in the past or the present, was a very strong figure. He hesitated for a moment, but still answered the phone. Eagle King's weathered and resolute figure appeared on the big TV screen. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes flickered, but his smile was natural. Uncle Li, I'm really surprised that you called me in person. Eagle King smiled indifferently, and his expression was a little cold. I don't have much time. Let's get down to business. After the collapse of the Li family, Eagle King naturally didn't have a good impression of the Wang family of Beihai. But he also didn't appreciate Wang Xiaoyao, who had betrayed the Wang family of Beihai. This had nothing to do with the Wang family of Beihai. An old man like him, who engraved his loyalty in his bones and was willing to give everything for it, had an instinctive aversion to any traitor. Go ahead, I'm listening. Wang Xiaoyao smiled and looked extremely sincere. Young madam will arrive in Reki City in 40 minutes. Eagle King's voice was calm. In 2 hours, she will enter the Dawn Islands. Get ready. Young madam. Young madam. Wang Xiaoyao's eyes suddenly widened. A look of surprise and hesitation constantly flashed in his eyes. Young madam. His voice became a little dry. Eagle King glanced at him and said expressionlessly, Of course it's Her Highness Qin Weibai. You went to Reki City? The private plane shuttled in the dark sky. Qin Weibai took off her shoes and curled up on the soft and spacious leather sofa, covered with a blanket. She was obediently reporting her whereabouts to Li Tianlan. Well, I'll land in dozens of minutes, and then I'll go to the Dawn Islands. On the phone, Li Tianlan was silent for a moment, and then he said with a faint smile, running around all day will get you spanked. Qin Weibai's face slightly blushed, looking more and more delicate and dreamy. She smiled coquettishly and said, then come on. I'm ready. Let's see if you can hit me. Opposite Qin Weibai, Gu Xianyan raised her head and looked at her suspiciously. She felt that Sister Qin's tone was a little unusual. Li Tianlan coughed dryly and said, I'll deal with you when you come back. Qin Weibai chuckled, and her voice was sweet and gentle. I miss you. Go home immediately after the matter here is settled, and accept the punishment, okay? Li Tianlan made a big noise and suddenly thought of something. The Dawn Islands to meet Wang Xiaoyao. Yes, this is an opportunity, Qin Weibai said softly. I can test him. I just received the news on my way here that Ji Wenzhang has arrived in Wuyue. He attacked suddenly and hid his whereabouts well. In this way, this is a better opportunity. What do you want to test? Li Tianlan asked directly. To see what's on his mind. Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes, and an incomparably bright light flashed across the depths of her eyes. Li Tianlan snorted coldly. What else can he think? Is it because he still wants to do something to you? I should have killed him in Beihai some time ago, but he slipped away so quickly. You look so cute when you're jealous. Qin Weibai was stunned and giggled. I really want to see your expression now. You must be gnashing your teeth in anger, aren't you? Do I have to be calm in the face of someone who thinks about my wife all day long? Li Tianlan sneered and said, I'll kill him sooner or later. Ah, his murderous aura is so strong. I'm scared. Qin Weibai pulled the blanket on her body. Li Tianlan did not speak. Well, don't be angry. I only belong to you. Qin Weibai smiled softly and said, If you want to kill him someday, ask me to come with you. Li Tianlan laughed, and all his unhappiness seemed to vanish. Gu Xianyan looked at Qin Weibai seriously and blinked her big eyes. She thought, is this sweet talk? But isn't it a little strange for a beautiful woman like Sister Qin to coax a man with sweet talk? Do you think there's something wrong with Wang Xiaoyao? Li Tianlan asked casually on the phone. I'm not sure yet. Qin Weibai blinked and said, but this opportunity is worth a try. Maybe he will show some of his foxtail. Well, Tianlan, is Li Huaqing still at our house? Yes, Li Tianlan said, but I haven't seen him yet. You can see him. Qin Weibai smiled and said, if possible, mention it to Li Huaqing. He can let Wang Qinglei join the Li family, but it's best to let him stay in Wuyue. Of course, it's just a suggestion. It doesn't matter if it succeeds or not. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and said slowly, what are you suspecting? Just a suspicion. Whether there is a basis or not, I still have to try. Qin Weibai's voice was lazy. I probably understand what you mean. Li Tianlan said, Well, then I'm hanging up. I still have to learn some more information. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will win every battle. Qin Weibai smiled and said. Li Tianlan said, okay. Qin Weibai said Mua to the phone, hung up the phone with a smile, and continued to play with the notebook in front of her. Sister Qin. Gu Xianyan looked at Qin Weibai, and her eyes and voice were a little sour. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows slightly. Is it the teacher's phone call? Gu Xianyan held her cheek with one hand and whispered, you are so kind to him. He is very kind to me too, Qin Weibai said casually. It's different. Gu Xianyan shook her head subconsciously, but she couldn't tell exactly what was different. Qin Weibai looked up at her, smiled, and continued to look at the notebook in front of her. There were pages of extremely detailed information in the notebook. It was about Wang Xiaoyao, Wang Tianzong, Wang Qinglei, and everything related to them. The information was extremely messy, and it could even be said to be a mess. Some of the information only had 2 short sentences or a few lines, and some of them were the speculations of the people who collected the information. There was a date at the end of each piece of information. The latest information about Wang Xiaoyao was 3 days ago. The earliest one was about 6 years ago. Qin Weibai had read this information, which had been collected for several years, many times in the past, but she could never be sure of anything. The information showed that Wang Xiaoyao had a very good relationship with Wang Tianzong when he was a child. However, this relationship began to have some subtle changes at about the age of 15. This change was so subtle that even the people involved did not notice it. The relationship between the two brothers was still very good, but there were more and more differences on various things. When Wang Xiaorao was 19 years old, he seemed to have a big fight with Wang Tianzong. It was impossible to investigate the cause, but since then Wang Xiaoyao had no contact with anything to manage the family. He became a prodigal son of the Wang family of Beihai, or rather, a playboy of the Wang family of Beihai. Although he didn't take the initiative to make trouble, there were countless stories of indulging in love affairs. Because of women, a considerable number of so-called young masters from wealthy families in Zhongzhou state had been severely punished by him. But anyone who provoked him, Wang Xiaoyao was simply unscrupulous in dealing with them. At that time, he was studying at Huaqing University, but he basically didn't attend classes all year round. He kept a senior sister in the student union, fell in love with a young counselor, wandered around places like Yuzhou Dance Academy and Yuzhou Film Academy as if they were his own harem. He bought luxury cars, played with luxury watches, set up an esports team, made several stars who were active on the screen to this day popular, and opened a club. He did nothing that should be done and nothing that should not be done. His name was Wang Xiaorao. Gradually, in other people's mouths, his name was reversed, and he became King Xiaorao of the Wang family of Beihai. This situation lasted until he met himself, who was 23 years old, when he was 30 years old. Qin Weibai was in a trance. To be exact, when Wang Xiaoyao was 30 years old, he met another himself. All of his flirtatiousness completely disappeared. He became a young boy who worried about personal gains and losses. Not long after that he returned to Beihai once, then appeared in Huading again, and then went to Wuyue. It seemed that from that time on, Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei became closer and closer. What did this mean? Sister, why did you ask the teacher to mention Wang Qinglei to Li Huaqing? What's the benefit of keeping him in Wuyue? Gu Xianyan suddenly asked. Maybe not. Qin Weibai said softly. At least if Wang Qinglei is still in Wuyue, then within 5 years, Wuyue belongs to Wang Qinglei, not Wang Xiaorao. Is there a difference? Gu Xianyan said doubtfully. They cooperate very closely. These two people, whoever leaves the other will not have a good end. From the perspective of interests, they are already one. They are almost inseparable. It seems so. Qin Weibai muttered to herself. But what is the truth? Xianyan, do you think Wang Xiaoyao really betrayed Mount Dibing? Chapter 12:22. When the helicopter lowered its altitude in the air, Qin Weibai in the cabin saw Wang Xiaorao for the first time. There was no dawn in the Dawn Islands at this time. It was dark and hazy for 24 hours. Wang Xiaoyao stood under the fluttering flag at the gate of the headquarters of the Aurora Legion. His clothes and flag were undulating in the cold wind, looking a little lonely and bleak. Qin Weibai's expression was calm and a little indifferent, but there was some thought in her eyes. The helicopter landed slowly. Wang Xiaoyao walked over against the roaring airflow caused by the rotors. He looked up at the vague face in the cabin that had appeared in his dreams countless times, and his eyes were a little dazed. The rotors were still spinning, but the speed gradually weakened, became slower and slower, and finally stopped. The door of the helicopter slowly opened, and Qin Weibai, wrapped in a coat and shawl, walked out of the cabin. Gu Xianyan followed her, and Eagle King, the current deputy commander of the Snowdance Corps, was at the back. Anyway, even if they all knew that the Aurora Legion did not dare to touch Qin Weibai, the young madam of the Li family now appeared in the eastern part of the European continent. No matter how bold the Snowdance Corps was, it was impossible for them to let her and Gu Xianyan come to the Dawn Islands. Eagle King following them was the most basic attitude. Qin Weibai glanced at Wang Xiaorao. Her eyes were calm and distant. It seemed that the distance of thousands of miles was stretched longer and longer in this glance. Wang Xiaoyao's palm moved, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He was a little self-deprecating. Qin Weibai did not shake hands with him. The goddess of the dark world did not have the habit of shaking hands with anyone. She had always been so high and mighty, looking down on everyone and the whole world. It was a kind of blasphemy for anyone to even approach her. Wang Xiaoyao had crazily pursued her for several years, but he had not even touched Qin Weibai's hand, let alone a little intimate action. To be exact, she did not even let Wang Xiaoyao get within 1 meter of her. So she was high and mighty, and she was unparalleled in the world. She naturally stood on the ethereal clouds and noble altar. She was so beautiful and otherworldly. Wang Xiaoyao had even thought before that it did not matter if he could not catch up with her in his life. It did not matter if he could not touch a finger of her in his life. It seemed that such a woman could not be touched by men in the world at all. Wang Xiaoyao was sure that he could pursue her for a lifetime. He could not get married, could not have children, could not have anything. He really didn't have any requirements. If all the men in the world could not get Qin Weibai, then he just wanted to be the man closest to her, even if they were just ordinary friends. That period of time, those thoughts were very bitter, but when he thought about it, there was also a faint sense of warmth. Then Li Tianlan appeared. He appeared beside Qin Weibai so naturally and easily. And Qin Weibai handed herself over to that young boy so naturally and easily. Who was Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan. To the end. So what? Something. Wang Xiaorao felt that he seemed to have forgotten the state he was in when he first got the news. He remembered Qin Weibai's happiness and pride when she held Li Tianlan's arm and announced that he was her man. She remembered that when they were in the Sky Academy, before Li Tianlan went to East Island, Qin Weibai put her arms around his neck and kissed him gently and sweetly. At that time, Li Tianlan, who had just left the Li family, felt inferior and confident, and was at a loss for what to do, was as young and inexperienced as a fool. He thought back to the countless nights when that ignorant brat had embraced the girl he had pursued for years, but had never gotten close to. Did he regard her as a treasure? Or did he casually and carelessly enjoy the docility and flattery of the goddess? Her coldness, her distance, her politeness, her strength, and all the things that could make people feel distant, unapproachable, and difficult to get along with naturally disappeared when she was in front of Li Tianlan. She was as passionate as fire and amorous. Every gesture she had before was just because she had not met the man she liked. At that time, Wang Xiaoyao understood that there was no such thing as an unattainable goddess. No matter how inviolable a goddess was, she would become a demon in front of her man, releasing all her charm and passion. It was also at that time that Wang Xiaoyao understood that the idea of protecting her for a lifetime was just his wishful thinking, which made him feel happy and bitter when he thought of that time. All his pursuit and sincerity really did not leave any trace in her heart. In his eyes, Qin Weibai was the goddess who occupied the whole world and all his soul. In Qin Weibai's eyes, Li Tianlan was her whole world and sky. So in Li Tianlan's eyes, what was Qin Weibai like? The answer that was about to come out was like a knife, stabbing into Wang Xiaoyao's heart, breaking his heart into grains of dust. Goddess? She did not exist. In Li Tianlan's eyes, Qin Weibai was just a woman. A woman who was strong and dignified in the outside world, but in front of him, she would cook for him, warm his bed, and serve him carefully. She would act coquettishly docile, and even in heat. Li Tianlan might love her very much, but it was obvious that Li Tianlan was in charge of their relationship. Therefore, even though Li Tianlan had Wang Yuetong and Dongqing Rushi by his side, Qin Weibai was still so obedient that no one dared to believe it, but it also broke their hearts. Wang Xiaorao felt that he had been completely trampled from beginning to end by Li Tianlan, who was still nothing at that time, in terms of personality and dignity. This kind of trampling had nothing to do with status, but because he had obtained the tenderness that he most wanted, but was doomed to not get. Wang Xiaoyao's state of mind was completely shattered by the sweetness shown by Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai bit by bit. It became dark, messy and gloomy. Qin Weibai had never cared about him. Her repeated rejections were so obvious that Wang Xiaoyao didn't understand it at that time. It wasn't until the moment he saw Li Tianlan that he realized what he had done. He was like a mangy dog who kept drooling at delicious food, but dared not approach it. His every move was so annoying. He had been crazy, drunk and angry, But he really could not hate her. Qin Weibai's repeated rejections had already shown her attitude. From beginning to end, she had never given him any chance. There was no ambiguity, no exploitation. She just clearly drew a line with him. His repeated attacks seemed to be relying on his family background, to not know what was good for him. He did not hate Qin Weibai. He was just angry at his own incompetence. The rest was endless killing intent for Li Tianlan. It was just that Li Tianlan's rise was too fast. He did not find a chance in East Island. After the final battle of Heaven Capital, Li Tianlan disappeared directly. In 3 years he had established his position as the first person of the young generation when he came back. He was the youngest combat capability of the invincible realm in the Dark World. Wang Xiaoyao sadly found that he could no longer defeat Li Tianlan, although he had entered the invincible realm at that time. But Wang Xiaoyao did not give up. He found his goal and direction again. He no longer used the name of the Wang family of Beihai to play games in the world and be a damn King Xiaoyao. He was Wang Xiaorao. He wanted the whole world to remember this name. He wanted to be an expert who could conquer the whole world. He betrayed Mount Dibbing, but he got the most elite force of the Beihai Corps. The comprehensive strength of the Beihai Corps had dropped a level because of his betrayal. The Aurora Legion came out of nowhere. He became an expert at the peak of the invincible realm. He was far away from Zhongzhou State. But his killing intent and hostility toward Li Tianlan were getting stronger and stronger. So when Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu came to him to ask for cooperation, Wang Xiaorao agreed without hesitation. They wanted the Wang family of Beihai, as long as they had the ability. They wanted the whole Dark World, as long as they had the ability. They could have anything they wanted, as long as they were qualified. What Wang Xiaoyao cared about was what they wanted to do. Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu wanted to kill Li Tianlan in the final battle of Beihai. At that time, the lineup seemed to have great hope, and this hope deeply touched Wang Xiaoyao's soul. Wang Xiaorao agreed to cooperate. He just made a request to Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu. If the final battle of Beihai was won, the interests of Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace, Zhongzhou State, and even the Dark World, he didn't want any of it. He only wanted Qin Weibai. The Qin Weibai who made him obsessed, crazy, and even irrational. The Qin Weibai who didn't care about him at all. He only wanted Qin Weibai. Wang Xiaorao didn't care about her past with Li Tianlan, whether she had a man, or whether she liked him or not. It didn't matter, because in Wang Xiaoyao's heart, she was still a goddess superior. He just needed to stay with her quietly. The final battle of Beihai failed. Li Tianlan didn't die, and Emperor Dong's palace didn't collapse. Emperor Dong's invincible aura had completely spread to the whole Dark World. He reached the top of the divine list, and was the first in the world. The goddess was still a goddess. But countless people in the world were admiring her vision. She didn't have Samsara Palace, and she didn't even have to be the patriarch of the Qin clan. She was Emperor Dong's woman. What did this identity mean? It meant that the Aurora Legion, a behemoth that was only one step away from the real superpower, had to be prepared. It meant that Wang Xiaoyao, as the commander of the Aurora Legion, had nothing to do with Emperor Dong's palace, and even had some hostility. When he learned that Emperor Dong's woman was coming, he could only wait here obediently, just like the notice that Eagle King gave to Wang Xiaoyao a few hours ago. Yes, it was a notice, without any consultation. Their young madam was coming to the Aurora Legion, so he had to wait. Hostile relationship? True position? This was no longer something that Emperor Dong's palace needed to consider. Now in the whole Dark World, perhaps except for the Wang family of Beihai, no other force dared to face Emperor Dong's palace alone. They might still be hostile to Emperor Dong's palace, and even dare to take action. But every action must be a combination of multiple forces, and a careful plan was carried out. But now, Wang Xiaorao had no doubt that if anything happened to Qin Weibai in the Aurora Legion, the entire Aurora Legion, the entire Dawn Islands, and even the entire special warfare system of Snow Country would be wiped out by Donghuang's furious sword light. Even if Wang Xiaoyao ran to any corner of the world, he would be caught and hacked into pieces. Qin Weibai walked out of the cabin and got closer and closer. Wang Xiaoyao gently clenched his fist with one hand and kept exerting force. He looked at Qin Weibai silently, and the pain and sorrow in his heart were overwhelming. He didn't know if it was because of the weather, but his face was a little pale. Long time no see. Wang Xiaoyao forced a smile. Little Bai. Call my name. Or call me Mrs. Li, or Patriarch Qin. Qin Weibai smiled gently, dreamily, with the alienation and politeness that Wang Xiaoyao was familiar with. If you call me that, someone will be unhappy. I don't like it either. Wang Xiaoyao's mouth moved, and he finally couldn't help but smile bitterly. I think we are friends. I don't have friends. Qin Weibai's voice was crisp and clear. Neither she nor she, who was lying in the headquarters of the Lin clan, had friends. She was raised by great master Wu Wei, and it was her senior brother who had lived with her since she was a child. She walked out of Lin, and then said goodbye to her adoptive father. She exchanged a book of Dongqing Huangtu's martial arts experience for Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, and the sword master became a saint. When Han Donglu was desperate and about to go bankrupt, she helped him out of his predicament and turned over a new leaf, so she had a military counselor. With her own martial arts experience, she helped a female swordsman from East Island to complete her revenge, and pointed out her future direction, so she had flaming fire. The 12 supermasters gathered around her one by one. Some of them had been famous figures in the Dark World for a long time, such as General and Azura, who had now joined the Dark Knights. There were also saints and military counselors who rarely appeared and only showed up in rare cases, which were almost incognito. With the 12 supermasters, the Samsara Palace began to officially appear in the Dark World. And because of the existence of figures like General Azura, the Samsara Palace always gave people a feeling that it had existed for a long time. But in fact, it was a behemoth that was infinitely close to a superpower set up by a little girl. At that time, there was nothing mysterious about time in front of Qin Weibai. She knew exactly what would happen in the future. She knew the secrets hidden by the wealthy families and the weaknesses they dared not expose. This created the Samsara Palace's unique intelligence department in the world, and it also allowed the Samsara Palace's industry to expand rapidly. The flourishing age fund rose at a speed that stunned the whole world. In the second year after the establishment of the Samsara Palace, the financial storm swept the world from the subcontinent. That was the first carnival of the Samsara Palace. The flourishing age fund swept away nearly 400 billion Zhongzhou dollars in the international financial market in half a year. Han Donglu also became a world-famous legend at that time. Everything in the Samsara Palace looked so incredible. In fact, Qin Weibai didn't have any idea about the 12 supermasters at first. She drew a lot of people to her side. Naturally, there were also people who wanted to betray her, coveted her body, and were not convinced by her. At that time, Qin Weibai was only 16 years old. She was still a child. No matter how high her IQ was, she was still a child. But when this child's instantaneous outburst was comparable to the peak of the invincible realm, the voices inside the Samsara Palace quickly unified. For the Samsara Palace, she was the master of Samsara Palace and also Qin Weibai. This was the core secret of the Samsara Palace. Similarly, she was the most qualified ruler. At least before she met Li Tianlan. She was cold, straightforward, decisive, and had a clear goal. She had the clearest logic of a ruler, but she had no feelings. So Qin Weibai had no friends. Military counselor, saint, and even flaming fire. In her eyes, they were all subordinates and pawns. Li Tianlan was her man. That was all he needed. Wang Xiaoyao looked at him silently for a while, then slowly turned sideways, reached out to the villa behind him, and whispered, "Miss Qin, please." It was impossible for him to address Qin Weibai as Mrs. Li, which clearly confirmed her fate. Maybe it would make Qin Weibai happy, but he couldn't call her that even if he was beaten to death. It's too stuffy inside. Qin Weibai tightened the wide shawl on her body, looked around, and suddenly said with a smile, "Do you mind if I take a look at your Aurora Legion?" Wang Xiaorao shook his head and turned to lead the way. The Dawn Islands consisted of more than a dozen islands of different sizes. The headquarters of the Aurora Legion was set up on the largest island in the center of the islands. Under the polar night, it was a world of ice and snow, without any kind of warm atmosphere. The headquarters of the Aurora Legion was completely like a monster armed to the teeth. In the distant night, intense but indistinct gunshots could be faintly heard. Countless assault boats were shuttling between the islands. The headquarters of the Aurora Legion was equipped with the most advanced automatic weapon system in Snow Nation. With a push of a button, concentrated firepower could cover every island and every corner of the Dawn Islands with less than 2 centimeters of error. Many roads in the headquarters were still in the process of construction. There were very few patrols and guards here. It seemed that all the defense work had been handed over to the surrounding islands. Therefore, under the curtain of night, the headquarters was dead silent, like a graveyard. It seems that the Aurora Legion is developing well. Snow Country is still very welcoming to you. Is this the famous U9? Qin Weibai asked with a smile as she casually walked in the headquarters of the Aurora Legion. She looked at the cold and silent island, and observed the weapon arrays arranged everywhere. It's the U-10 codenamed Red Eagle. It's more stable than the U-9, and it's loaded with 5 more weapon arrays. Its attack is more comprehensive. One of them is a laser weapon array that's not very mature. It can instantly produce a high temperature of more than 5,000 degrees. It's a trump card, Wang Xiaoyao said softly. The U-9 automatic weapon system was a topic that Snow Country had been working on in recent years. The arrival of Wang Xiaoyao brought a lot of variables to this topic. He provided some information about the automatic weapon system of the Wang family of Beihai to Snow Country, and helped them break through many technical bottlenecks. The U-10 could be regarded as an upgraded version of the U-9. There was no qualitative change, but its firepower was more powerful. It could be said to be one of the core technologies of Snow Country at present. 5,000 degrees. Qin Weibai murmured to herself. Zhongzhou State, Star State, England, Germany, and the Wang family of Beihai had broken through the bottleneck of laser weapons 10 years ago. A few years ago, they began to tentatively apply it to various cutting-edge armaments. At present, it was far from mature, but it could definitely be said to be advanced. At present, the biggest advantage of laser weapons was the absolute firing speed and the instantaneous high temperature. However, it was not realistic to maintain the absolute firing speed, and it was not very stable. Therefore, all countries studied high temperature. The application of advanced weapons undoubtedly further reduced the role of super experts. What did a high temperature of 5,000 degrees mean? Fire flaming realm experts could ignite flames out of thin air. A normal expert at the peak of the fire flaming realm could produce a flame of nearly 300 degrees. Fireman, who was known as the strongest fire flaming realm expert, could produce a flame of nearly 1,000 degrees when he attacked with all his strength. Even Li Tianlan's current value would not be much higher than that of Fireman. A high temperature of 5,000 degrees was a fatal threat to Li Tianlan. What's the plan of the Aurora Legion in the future? Qin Weibai asked casually. Wang Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes subconsciously. Snow Country is different from most countries, and it's also different from East Island. No matter how bad their economy is, their foundation and national strength are there. Their attitude towards the Aurora Legion will not be the same as East Island's attitude towards the Purgatory of Heaven capital. You are now in the honeymoon period of cooperation. They will support you and send you armaments. Behind these gifts, there may be a chronic poison. They will definitely try to conquer the Aurora Legion and conquer you for their use. So although the Aurora Legion is developing well now, it has no prospects. It's like a castle in the air. What are your plans for the future? Qin Weibai said slowly. You need a backing that can support all your actions. Wang Xiaoyao understood what Qin Weibai meant. A backing that could support all his actions and let him take root in Snow Country, even if he fell out with Snow Country. Many countries actually had this strength. But considering various reasons, there were very few countries that could meet this condition. The Zhongzhou State Parliament could, but Wang Xiaoyao didn't want to get involved for the time being. In fact, the Parliament of Zhongzhou State had extended an olive branch to him several times, but Wang Xiaoyao had been dragging it on. At this time, turning to the Parliament of Zhongzhou State would mean fighting head-on with Emperor Dong's palace. The current Aurora Legion obviously did not have this kind of strength. The Wang family of Beihai could do that. But he couldn't go back, so he naturally wouldn't receive any support. In addition to the first two, Emperor Dong's palace also had the strength to do so. Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a while and said slowly, "If you are here to invite me to join Emperor Dong's palace, I refuse. I don't know how stubborn you are." "That's stupid." Qin Weibai's comment was light and merciless. Since Wang Xiaoyao had betrayed the Wang family of Beihai, taking refuge in Emperor Dong's palace was his best choice at the moment. Qin Weibai believed that Wang Xiaoyao could see it clearly. The Zhongzhou State Assembly looked good, but that was all. Li Huaqing's actions seemed to be covetous of Li Tianlan. But he was in Emperor Dong's palace, which showed that he attached great importance to Emperor Dong's palace. If Wang Xiaorao turned to the council at this time, he would only be a pawn against Li Tianlan, a pawn that could be sacrificed at any time. Emperor Dong's palace was his only choice. She was sure that Wang Xiaorao knew this. But he refused. If that wasn't stupid, then what was? This is a matter of dignity. Maybe you don't agree, but this is my attitude. I don't want to see the woman I love being whispered in the arms of the man I work for. Even if I succeed, it will be the most thorough failure. Qin Weibai didn't say a word. Her side profile was a little cold and looked more delicate. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was clear and serious. She couldn't tell the truth from the lie. "This is not the main purpose of my visit," Qin Weibai said lightly. When Wang Xiaoyao's eyes fell on her, she said slowly, "I owe you a favor. Maybe I can pay it back now." "Oh." Wang Xiaoyao looked at her quietly. His eyes were quiet, but there was a kind of greed without any other desire in them. It seemed that he wanted to deeply imprint the side profile in his eyes into his bones. "We worked together in East Island." Qin Weibai's voice was calm. "I said at the right time, I can pay you back or cooperate with you. It has nothing to do with the Wang family of Beihai." Wang Xiaoyao's eyes quietly condensed for a moment. Of course, he remembered this. On the second day before the final battle of Heaven Capital, beside the fishing village of Ninghu in East Island, he took Demon Eye and cooperated with Samsara Palace to kill an incredible teenager. A teenager who was only in his teens, but broke the limit of his body and exerted the power of the half-step invincible realm. Wang Xiaoyao couldn't evaluate that teenager. He was not a so-called genius. To have that power at that age, Wang Xiaoyao could only see cruelty. If he lived to this day, he might not be as powerful as Li Tianlan, but he was almost sure to be qualified to enter the divine list. Maybe his ranking would be higher than his. Wang Xiaoyao still didn't understand the deep meaning of that cooperation. The lineup of Emperor Dong's palace at that time, even the last sword that killed the teenager, was done by the hidden Samsara Palace master. Wang Xiaoyao didn't know the meaning of Qin Weibai's cooperation with him. Does Wang Tianzong know about this? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. This question came out of the blue, without any warning. Wang Xiaoyao shook his head subconsciously. I don't know. Qin Weibai took a serious look at him. She was still not sure if it was true or not. She said softly, "You don't want to join Emperor Dong's palace. With your IQ, you won't join the parliament. Then your life here is destined to be difficult. In the final battle of Beihai, you cut off one of Xiang'a's arms. She will soon enter the peak of the invincible realm. At that time, she will come to you to get back at you. I'm welcome at any time." Wang Xiaoyao smiled very naturally. He might not be able to catch up with Li Tianlan's realm in this life, but he had never been afraid of anyone in the same realm. Every move of the Dark Knights will cause a chain reaction in many ways. You don't join the parliament or Emperor Dong's palace, but you can't give up Zhongzhou State. As long as you have chips in Zhongzhou State, you have the hope of playing games with all parties here. Qin Weibai's eyelashes trembled slightly. Wang Qinglei is under a lot of pressure, right? Does he want to go further? Wang Xiaoyao's eyes lit up for a moment. He nodded and said yes. In return for that year, I will persuade Tianlan. The power of the new group will support Wang Qinglei as the new director. Qin Weibai's beautiful and ruddy lips raised a little bit. It's just that the relationship between the academy and the new group is tense, and Minister Dongqing's attitude is also very obvious, which will make everyone feel uneasy. In this election, I think to a certain extent, Yi Dongxing's promotion is inevitable, even if it is to check and balance Minister Dongcheng. This is the general trend, and it's hard to reverse it at present. Wang Xiaoyao certainly understood this truth, which was also what made Wang Qinglei feel stressed recently. But if he got the support of the new group, Wang Xiaoyao's voice was a little expectant. Do you want to push Qinglei into the cabinet? If he could enter the cabinet, it would undoubtedly be the best choice, and it would be one step closer to Wang Qinglei's ultimate goal. That's also difficult. Whether it's Hua Xingyang or Wen Siyuan, compared to them, Wang Qinglei has no advantage at all. A mysterious smile bloomed from the corner of her mouth. The current position is not very easy to arrange, so I don't think it's necessary for Wang Qinglei to leave Wuyue for the time being. It's good for him to be the director of Wuyue. He can further accumulate capital, and at the same time further control Wuyue. He can also be the director of that position with the least competitive pressure. I think the Prince Group will also agree to this plan. Qin Weibai's voice was soft and clear. As she spoke, her bright eyes were staring at Wang Xiaoyao's eyes, silently observing the changes in Wang Xiaoyao's eyes from the most subtle parts. In the Dawn Islands under the polar night, the night in the morning was very dark. Wang Xiaoyao's cold eyes, which reflected the heaven and earth, seemed to be brighter. Other than that, there was no change. The two of them looked at each other for less than 3 seconds. Wang Xiaoyao turned his head and continued to move forward. His voice sounded softly, faintly, "That's fine too." Chapter 12:23. There was a silence in Wang Xiaoyao's voice that was as deep as the night. His answer was simple and ethereal, like the wind blowing over the Dawn Islands, lonely and cold. Qin Weibai's eyes sparkled with the light of thinking, and she didn't speak for a while. She was analyzing what Wang Xiaoyao's answer meant. In fact, Wang Xiaoyao was wrong about one thing. He was not without a trace in Qin Weibai's heart. But this trace had nothing to do with love, but a kind of caution and defense that could not be seen through. Wang Xiaoyao was definitely not a simple person. The whole world knew this very well. It was not because he betrayed the Wang family of Beihai, not because he was an expert at the peak of the invincible realm, and not because of the current atmosphere of the Aurora Legion. Even when he was the King Xiaoyao of the Wang family of Beihai in the coat of a playboy of Beihai, people who really knew Wang Xiaoyao would not underestimate him, or even ignore him. Wang Xiaoyao's EQ was extremely high. When he met Qin Weibai, he did a lot of seemingly absurd things in Zhongzhou State. But the reason why those things were so famous was not because they were really rebellious, but because he was Wang Tianzong's younger brother. Many things seemed inconceivable when it came to him. But in fact, Wang Xiaoyao did not really delay the things that he should do. In the inheritance of Beihai from generation to generation, there were more and more branches, and the direct descendants of each generation were rarely alone. Most of the patriarchs of the Wang family of Beihai had brothers or sisters, and sometimes more than one. Most of the brothers and sisters of the North Sea patriarchs were people with extremely high emotional intelligence. They might shake the world, or they might be unknown, or they might be dissolute and unrestrained. No matter how they appeared in front of the world, in reality, there was only one important role for them. That was to be the core link between the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group. This role had been played by the younger brother of the heavenly son of Beihai, the only king parallel in the history of the Wang family of Beihai, the only god of war in the history of Beihai, the ancestor of the Lin clan, and the founder of the Li family, had also played this role. Wang Xiaoyao had also played this role, and he had done an excellent job. The Wang family of Beihai was the top wealthy family in the world, while the Southeast Group was the top group in Zhongzhou State. To some extent, there were innate differences and conflicts between the two groups. Under such circumstances, a person who could absolutely guarantee the interests of the Wang family of Beihai, walk among the many tycoons of the Southeast Group without being ostracized, harmonize the relationship between the two sides, and construct a unified position between the two sides was extremely important. This was definitely not a responsibility that ordinary people could bear. It was not an exaggeration to say that those who were qualified for this position were all geniuses who were smooth and slick in all aspects. It was no exaggeration to say that people who could be in this position This was also the biggest bargaining chip of his betrayal. The current Wuyue governor Yu Chuanguang was just a representative. There were also some elite forces within the Southeast group that had been pushed out and began to gather around Wang Qinglei. They were also Wang Xiaoyao's core team. Under such circumstances, even if he betrayed the Wang family of Beihai, there were still senior members of the Southeast group who were willing to speak for him. Wang Qinglei even had to rely on Wang Xiaorao to intervene in the affairs of the supervisory department of Wuyue through the connections of the Southeast group at this critical moment. There were also Wang Xiaoyao's men in several major sword-bearing families in North Sea. The damage that his betrayal brought to the Wang family of Beihai was self-evident. The deeper impact might not break out until a few years later. How could a person who could do this be mediocre? However, did Wang Xiaoyao really betray Mount Dibing? Qin Weibai did not dare to confirm this, but she had to verify it. In that memory that had already passed, Wang Xiaorao died in the hands of Li Guangtu. Calculating the time, it should have happened in the autumn of next year, but this was obviously unlikely to happen now. Wang Xiaoyao's death during that time also accelerated the rise of Li Tianlan in the Wang family of Beihai, consolidated his position in the Wang family of Beihai, and successfully replaced Wang Xiaoyao. That was why Li Tianlan was stationed in Zhongzhou State on behalf of Mount Dibing. At the beginning of the second year after Wang Xiaoyao's death, he met Gu Xianyan, who also represented Kunlun City in the world. After Wang Xiaoyao's death, Wang Tianzong did not seem to have any special reaction. Some people said that it was because Wang Xiaorao had rebelled long ago, so Wang Tianzong killed him with a borrowed knife. Some people said that Li Tianlan was eager to be promoted, so he cooperated with Li Guangtu. The truth was confusing. Even in the end, Qin Weibai did not figure out what was going on, which directly led to Qin Weibai's lack of confidence in Wang Xiaoyao's future. Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaorao. What was the relationship between them? After the chaos in Snow Country, did they really turn against each other? For power, for status, and to some extent for herself? Qin Weibai wanted to confirm it many times, but she could not. She was sure that Wang Xiaoyao's feelings when he pursued her were real, but it did not mean anything. If Wang Xiaoyao really turned against Mount Dibing, she might be one of the reasons, but it should not be the whole reason. But on the other hand, if Wang Xiaoyao did not turn against Mount Dibing, her reason could definitely be a perfect excuse. Everything that Wang Xiaorao had shown so far had no flaws. He personally tore apart the core strength of the Wang family of Beihai, and even left a huge hidden danger to the future of the Wang family of Beihai. This kind of damage was real. This might be a real betrayal. Similarly, a situation without any flaws might mean that it was a flawless game. If Wang Xiaoyao did not betray Mount Dibing, then what did all this mean now? What was Mount Dibing plotting? What would the consequences be? Every step of the development of Emperor Dong's palace was the key. At this time, Qin Weibai kept the highest level of vigilance and defense against the Wang family of Beihai. There was no need to emphasize the foundation and strength of the Wang family of Beihai. If Wang Xiaoyao's betrayal was a trap made by Mount Dibing, then no matter from which standpoint, no matter what they were plotting, Emperor Dong's palace was a part that they could not ignore. They would definitely find a way to drag Emperor Dong's palace into this trap. Maybe Wang Shengxiao or Wang Xiaorao would do it. At that time, what awaited Li Tianlan might be eternal damnation again. Reorganizing the Li family, fighting against Jiang Shangyu, suppressing Gu Xingyun, and the parliamentary game were all Li Tianlan's problems. The talents and strength of Emperor Dong's palace were enough to deal with these problems. As for Qin Weibai, she had to keep an eye on everything of the Wang family of Beihai. Now they seem to have taken no action, but maybe they were the most dangerous. Therefore, it was imperative for them to test the waters this time. Wang Qinglei was now in a critical period. His staying or leaving in Wuyue might really reflect Wang Xiaoyao's attitude. But Wang Xiaoyao had no attitude. A simple sentence was fine. He did not reveal any flaws. Was there really no flaws? Qin Weibai was thoughtful. To be honest, if Qinglei stays in Wuyue as a director, he won't gain much. It's not unprecedented for a provincial speaker to serve as a director, but it's very rare. If possible, I still hope that he can suppress Yi Dongsheng. This is also of great benefit to the new group and Minister Dongsheng. Wang Xiaoyao said slowly, as if he was fighting for something, but also as if he said it unintentionally. Wang Qinglei did have the capital to compete with Hua Zhengyang and Wen Siyuan, but obviously, this capital was not enough. The Prince Group did have the plan to continue to promote powerful figures to control the cabinet, but the rise of the new group made this plan only a plan. The most confident was to let Wang Qinglei and Yi Dongsheng compete. Both of them were competing for the position of director and vice president, but in different directions. If Yi Dongsheng became a director, he would be elected vice president, and he would not lose his current position. He would also be the deputy minister in the army headquarters, only after Dongqing Wudi. After becoming a director, he would become Dongqing Wudi's strongest opponent in the army headquarters, and he was fully qualified to disrupt Dongqing Wudi's layout. If Wang Qinglei became a director and served as vice president, his future direction would have nothing to do with the army headquarters. To some extent, he could be said to be Li Huaqing's deputy. Of course, from another perspective, he could also be said to be Li Huaqing's main opponent. The relationship between the new group and the academy was tense. Li Tianlan had enough reasons to support Wang Qinglei to suppress Yi Dongsheng, which could also make the new group easier in the game with the academy in the future. The new group supported Wen Siyuan, suppressed Yi Dongsheng, and supported Wang Qinglei. Was it contradictory? Not at all. The advance and retreat were all balanced wisdom. The core was for the interests of the group. The complex entanglement was a problem that every person standing at the peak must consider and operate. Therefore, in the face of Qin Weibai's temptation, Wang Xiaoyao, who did not know if he had already noticed her intentions, calmly put forward his own reasons and requirements. And he was aboveboard, which was also impossible to distinguish. So you want Wang Qinglei to leave Wuyue? Qin Weibai suddenly laughed. Her question could already be considered absolutely direct. That was the main purpose of her temptation. The situation was very simple. If Wang Qinglei left Wuyue, the most likely person to replace him to control Wuyue was Yu Chuanguang. And it could only be Yu Chuanguang. Yu Chuanguang was Wang Xiaoyao's real confidant and absolute best friend. And Wang Qinglei was Wang Xiaoyao's closest ally. If Wang Xiaoyao really betrayed Mount Dibing, there would be no difference between the two of them controlling Wuyue. But if Wang Xiaoyao did not betray Mount Dibing, the difference between the two of them controlling Wuyue was like heaven and earth. I'm just fighting for the best situation for us. Wang Xiaoyao said with a calm expression. The new group has the strength to do this. If it succeeds, we also have the strength to give you enough returns. After a pause, he continued. Of course, Qinglei must be on the board. If we can't go up from Yuzhou, it's not unacceptable to stay in Wuyue. Staying dormant for a few years will only make us stronger. Qin Weibai smiled. It seemed that she had seen through everything, like a polite echo, or something else. She was still not sure about Wang Xiaoyao's attitude. But she could not be sure, which was already a kind of news. Wang Xiaoyao turned to look at Qin Weibai. Her face became more and more three-dimensional and perfect in the dark night. It was so exquisite that it was like a magnificent and soul-stirring dream. He looked at her bright eyes that he would never forget and suddenly laughed. Qin Weibai raised her eyebrows slightly. I'm suddenly thinking about a problem. Wang Xiaoyao chuckled softly and said, If at this time, I want to take you away at all costs, the Wang family of Beihai, the Aurora Legion, the world, and the ambition will all go to hell. I only want you. I can only take you away. I can give up everything, but you are mine. Even now, if I take action, what do you think our future will be like? Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes slightly and smiled. You can't take me away, and you will die a terrible death. Is this a threat? Wang Xiaoyao looked deeply into Qin Weibai's eyes. This is advice. Qin Weibai smiled impeccably. I really don't know martial arts, but it doesn't mean that I don't have the ability to protect myself. If you want to take action, just try. If you can't get me, you will only lose everything you have. Maybe it's true. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. But this idea is very tempting, isn't it? I may lose everything, but I may get you. Even if there is only a 1 in a million chance. There was a vague sharpness in the cold wind under the night sky. Qin Weibai's eyes flickered, and she remained calm. Do it. She spoke slowly. Wang Xiaorao suddenly turned around. Qin Weibai was still standing beside him. However, that voice came from behind him. In his sight, another Qin Weibai appeared in Wang Xiaoyao's sight. The white shawl and coat floated in the night wind, not stirring up any dust, like a banished fairy. Wang Xiaoyao subconsciously raised his palm for a moment, but he did not dare to really stretch it out. He suddenly couldn't tell where Qin Weibai was. His perception had been distorted by a kind of spiritual power that was illusory but real. Wang Xiaoyao fell silent. He remembered the first time he met Qin Weibai. He thought of his persistent and fierce pursuit. He thought of himself running back to Beihai excitedly and telling his elder brother that he had found a partner who could be with him for a lifetime. That year, Wang Tianzong personally went to Huading and met the woman who had become famous in Zhongzhou State and represented Samsara Palace. That was the first time Wang Tianzong and Qin Weibai met. The conversation between the two did not last long. In less than 20 minutes. It could not be said that they parted on bad terms, nor could it be said that they had a good talk. Wang Xiaoyao remembered that his elder brother sent Qin Weibai away in his own car, while he stood under the small pavilion of the club, looking at the stream under his feet, and was silent for a long time. Wang Xiaoyao clearly remembered his feelings at that time. Excitement, impulse, and expectation. He was sure that his elder brother would be very satisfied with such a woman as his sister-in-law. But at noon that day, under the pavilion, Wang Tianzong, who had been silent for a long time, just turned to look at him and said calmly, "You don't deserve her, and I can't suppress her. If she enters the gate of the Wang family of Beihai, maybe the whole Wang family of Beihai should be surnamed Qin instead of Wang after 20 years. Wang Xiaoyao still remembered that his elder brother patted him on the shoulder at that time. It was very soft, but it was so heavy that it made his heart cold. He said, "Forget it." A long time after that, he talked to Wang Tianzong about Qin Weibai again, and talked about his evaluation of Qin Weibai. At that time, Wang Tianzong did not praise Qin Weibai's unrivaled beauty, but that evaluation was still fresh in Wang Xiaoyao's memory. Her heart is like a flying dragon and a dancing phoenix, and her divine moon shoots the cold river. For the first time in his life, Wang Xiaoyao heard his talented and bold elder brother evaluate a woman like that. A young woman in her 20s. But Wang Xiaoyao did not give up. He tried harder to get close to her, and every word he said to her could make him happy for a long time. Until Li Tianlan appeared. Until she leaned against Li Tianlan's arms. Her flying dragon and a dancing phoenix. Her moon shoots the cold river. All the things that made him toss and turn in his dreams became a real dream, shattered under the cruel reality, and had nothing to do with him. Wang Xiaoyao put down his palm completely. Under the curtain of night, the vague sharpness slowly dissipated. He looked at Qin Weibai's eyes. It was like the first time they met. Her eyes were always full of fog, looking into the distance. He did not see his shadow in those eyes. Wang Xiaoyao smiled reluctantly. His face was still pale, and he said with difficulty, "I'm just kidding." "No." Qin Weibai shook her head and said with a faint smile, "You're trying to change the subject and divert my attention, right?" For the first time, Wang Xiaoyao's expression was stiff. It flashed away. "I haven't been updating regularly in the past 2 days. In fact, I want to write more. A few days ago, it was very windy. I slept with the window open all night, and then enjoyed the air conditioner during the day. I don't know if it was cold or hot, but I began to have a low fever and felt weak all over. Yesterday was even more tragic. It's a little painful. It's not an adjective. It's a real pain in the balls. I feel like they're swollen. I went to the hospital to have a checkup today, and it's not a big problem. Then when I came back, I found that it's not a pain in the balls, but a pain in the flesh. Damn, I took off my pants and came back, and then I found that. Anyway, it's very uncomfortable. When I feel better, I'll try to write more." Chapter 12:24. The sound of the rotor disturbed the darkness. The helicopter parked at the headquarters of the Aurora Legion slowly rose into the air and flew away in the roaring sound. He came calmly, but he left calmly. Qin Weibai did not stay for breakfast, nor did she enter Wang Xiaoyao's villa. They talked for an hour and just walked a small circle around the island of the headquarters of the Aurora Legion. After the talk, they left. Neat and tidy. The temperature in the eastern part of the European continent was really cold. In the cabin of the helicopter, Qin Weibai wrapped herself in a brand new blanket again. However, this was not the extremely luxurious private plane after all. There was no soft and spacious leather sofa, no music reverberating through the top sound system, and no hand-ground coffee. Qin Weibai's body, wrapped in a blanket, swayed slightly in the somewhat bumpy cabin. She held a thermos cup that had been used for many years. It contained the black tea that the army prepared for her to warm her body before she set off from the Snowdance Corps. At this time, the temperature was just right. Qin Weibai sipped the tea and looked at the Aurora Legion that was getting farther and farther outside the cabin. The entire Dawn Islands turned into a blurry light as the helicopter flew past. Qin Weibai's pupils were filled with mist, mysterious and hazy. "Sister Qin, have you got the answer?" Gu Xianyan looked at Qin Weibai and asked curiously. When Qin Weibai and Wang Xiaorao were talking, she and Eagle King had been following behind them. They were neither too far nor too close, so they could hear what they were talking about. However, after Gu Xianyan sorted out the various conversations, she found that she did not understand some of them. "I got it," Qin Weibai said softly and shook her head. "I didn't get it either." Then Wang Xiaorao. Gu Xianyan became more and more curious. The best and the worst make history, and the mediocre reproduce the race. Qin Weibai said with a smile. "We have to admit that this world belongs to bigotry. The bigoted Li family, the bigoted Wang family of Beihai, and the two brothers of this generation of Beihai are also bigoted. I still don't understand." Gu Xianyan looked at Qin Weibai innocently. Qin Weibai looked at her and said softly, "I'm still not sure if Wang Xiaorao betrayed Mount Dibbing. This is indeed the answer I want, but it's not the one I want the most. I'm here just to make sure of one thing. Can I use Wang Xiaorao to guide some future situations of the Wang family of Beihai? The answer should be certain. That's enough. Wang Xiaorao may have betrayed Mount Dibbing, or maybe he didn't, but it doesn't matter. I can be sure that he did not betray the Wang family of Beihai." Eagle King, who had been silent, suddenly smiled. From a certain point of view, Wang Qinglei did not betray the Wang family of Beihai. He just betrayed Wang Tianzong. He thought that the Wang family of Beihai that he and Wang Xiaorao would lead in the future would be better than it is now, even the best. If not for this reason, Wang Qinglei had no need to betray him. Indeed. Qin Weibai nodded. But Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei are still different. The former can pay more, even everything, for some purposes. The latter may be more intelligent, but it lacks some boldness. So in the alliance between them, the future patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai is Wang Xiaoyao, and Wang Qinglei only wants to be the president. Eagle King's voice was calm. Patriarch. Qin Weibai was thoughtful. She carefully recalled the conversation just now, summed up what she had learned, and analyzed every expression of Wang Xiaoyao. An hour of conversation. They could talk about a lot of things, or a lot of nonsense. It mainly depended on how Qin Weibai tested him. Many of Qin Weibai's words were impolite, even a little mean. She didn't care what impression she left in Wang Xiaoyao's mind. It had nothing to do with her. She only cared about what real information she got from this conversation. There was no doubt that Wang Xiaoyao was vigilant and guarded against Emperor Dong's palace. Many of the things he said were vague. But at least Qin Weibai could be sure that the cooperation between Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei was definitely not as close as it seemed. In Qin Weibai's eyes, this was undoubtedly a clue that could be used. What happened inside the Wang family of Beihai had nothing to do with her. She always cared about how Emperor Dong's palace should develop under the new situation after the great changes in Beihai, how to avoid traps, and how to find opportunities. Wang Xiaorao said some things in the conversation, some of which he didn't even notice. But Qin Weibai had begun to think and tried to make a plan. The final battle of Heaven Capital, the chaos in Snow Country, the dawn of a new era, and the Samsara Palaces step by step were the plans of the master of Samsara Palace, and also Qin Weibai's thoughts. They were the same person. All the situations that were confusing to outsiders were constructed bit by bit in this kind of silence. Go back to Tiannan. Qin Weibai whispered. I want to be quiet for a while. She took out her notebook and began to record every word of the conversation with Wang Xiaoyao. She planned to go back and carefully analyze it when she calmed down completely. Eagle King nodded and gave an order to the cockpit. The helicopter began to accelerate in the night. His phone rang abruptly. Qin Weibai took out her phone and looked at the number. It was military counselor's call. It was officially 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai calmly pressed the answer button and said, Hello. Your Highness, there is a breakthrough in Liu Yang's problem. Military counselor's voice sounded with a hint of a smile. Qin Weibai subconsciously sat up straight. A comprehensive breakthrough. Yes, he explained Zhao Yu's problem. Military counselor's voice was obviously a little excited. Liu Yang, the speaker of Anong and Liaodong. There was no possibility of stopping the growing storm in Liaodong. It would only get bigger and bigger. And Anton had become a real powder keg. 3 days ago, Liu Yang, the speaker of Anong, was controlled by Liaodong's Ministry of Supervision. In 3 days, Anong the powder keg finally exploded. And it was a real big fish that came out of it. Zhao Yu, the deputy speaker of Liaodong, one of Bai Qingqian's main opponents in Liaodong, was also likely to become the governor of Liaodong after Bai Qingqian left Liaodong. Liu Yang's problem involved Zhao Yu. It was self-evident what it meant. Once Zhao Yu's problem was confirmed, the whole of Liaodong, even Wang Wei, the current leader of the third supervisory group, would be in a precarious and desperate situation. Qin Weibai gently raised the corner of her mouth. Now Ji Wenjiang will have a headache. Obviously, Zhao Yu's problem would be investigated through the special task force set up by the Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State. This was Ji Wenjiang's responsibility. Now the whole Southeast group was trying to avoid this situation, but it was obviously unavoidable this time. Wait for Beihai to officially enter. Qin Weibai whispered. Chapter 1225. Have you discussed this matter with Tianlan? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Of course, I just called His Majesty. Military counselor's answer was very calm. Qin Weibai smiled and felt that she thought too much. Emperor Dong's palace was Li Tianlan's, and military counselor was also Li Tianlan's chief administrative officer. If anything happened, he would naturally report to Li Tianlan immediately. If Qin Weibai was the master of Samsara Palace, military counselor might confuse this order, but now she was just her. They were the same person. She emphasized this matter many times, and so did the master of Samsara Palace. But after all, not everyone could accept this matter, even if it was the truth. Saint could accept it, because when he first got Dongqing Huangtu's martial arts experience, when he clearly saw his road to the invincible realm, he knew very well who he would be loyal to in the future, not to Samsara Palace, but to Li Tianlan. So his code name was Saint. Horsewoman could accept it, but at the beginning, she might have had other thoughts. Her loyalty came from the little things she had done in the Qin clan over the past 2 years. But this did not represent what others thought. For example, flaming fire. In the heart of the former first supermaster of Samsara Palace, now the Queen of Dark, she had always been a thief who replaced her boss, stole her identity, her man, and her future. The point was that the master of Samsara Palace was willing to do all this. Flaming Fire, who valued her boss more than herself, could not accept all this. Qin Weibai knew that Flaming Fire did not like her. And what was very strange was that she and the master of Samsara Palace were really the same person. The similarity was in all aspects and details. But when Flaming Fire faced them, she could always tell which one was her real boss at first glance. She almost did not hide her hostility, vigilance, and defense against Qin Weibai. So when the chaos in Snow Country ended, when the Eternal Sword fell, and when Qin Weibai successfully replaced the master of Samsara Palace, the sense of powerlessness that had been suppressed in Flaming Fire's heart for a long time broke out completely, and turned into boundless anger and despair. She left the Samsara Palace. For more than 2 years, she had no contact with Emperor Dong's palace. All this was meaningless. But she still persisted in a daze. So did Flaming Fire. It was the same for the military counselor. For military counselor, the current Qin Weibai was not the woman who had pulled him out of the desperate situation. If she wasn't, then she wasn't. There was nothing to argue about. There was only one person he was truly loyal to. Not Li Tianlan, not Qin Weibai, but the master of Samsara Palace who was on the verge of death. This kind of loyalty was not the slightest bit fake. The Flourishing Age Fund nominally belonged to him, but in fact he only held 3% of the shares of the Flourishing Age Fund. The remaining 97% belonged to Qin Weibai, and now belonged to Li Tianlan. Countless share transfer agreements were signed the moment the Flourishing Age Fund merged into Emperor Dong's palace. The Flourishing Age Fund was the source. Thousands of agreements representing countless interests of various groups and fields were eagerly handed to Li Tianlan by military counselor. Now he was the chief administrative officer of Emperor Dong's palace. But for Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai, military counselor was just doing his duty. He had no loyalty. He just wanted to cultivate a qualified chief administrative officer, then retire in peace and travel around the world. He also did not approve of the current Qin Weibai. Of course, he couldn't call her first, and then inform Li Tianlan. What did Tianlan say? All kinds of thoughts kept flashing through her mind, and Qin Weibai's voice was a little lower. His Majesty asked me to be careful recently. Military counselor said with a smile. Qin Weibai also laughed. Just from this response, it could be seen that Li Tianlan was now gradually becoming mature. He could also see the real core and key of things. Qin Weibai's somewhat depressed mood began to become a little happy, and her desire to return to Tiannan became more urgent. Yes, be careful. That's my advice too. Qin Weibai said. She and Li Tianlan were naturally not worried about the safety of military counselor. Military counselor was a top expert of the half-step invincible realm. Because of his age, there was no hope for him to break through to the invincible realm. But in today's dark world, except for the dozen people on the new divine list, no one else was a threat to him. They hoped that military counselor would be careful about the industry of the Flourishing Age Fund. I can only say I'll try my best. Military counselor was a little helpless. Zhao Yu will not be the end. Qin Weibai reminded him. I'm afraid that a cornered dog will do something desperate. Military counselor sighed. The problem of Zhao Yu, deputy speaker of Liaodong, could be said to have shocked the whole Zhongzhou state. This was a bloody storm that Bai Qingqian personally set off in the core backyard of the academics. The outside world was praising the courage of this female speaker, and it could also see the tragedy of this confrontation. Zhao Yu would definitely not be the end of the storm in Liaodong. Even in a sense, this was just a starting point. Once the supervisory department of Liaodong broke through Zhao Yu again, there was no doubt that the whole Liaodong would really be turned upside down. At that time, it would be almost impossible for the academy to keep Liaodong intact. This knife was completely cut at the academy's vital point, and it almost hurt to the bone. No matter what happened next, the academics would certainly not bear it, and the counterattack was expected. A cornered dog will do something desperate? Now the big shots of the academy probably wanted to tear up Emperor Dong's palace. And the Flourishing Age Fund was undoubtedly the best breakthrough for the academy. There were too many industries of the Flourishing Age Fund, and the problems could be said to be continuous. As long as they investigated, they would inevitably find something. The joint investigation of various departments now seemed to have fallen into an unprecedented deadlock. Many people in the outside world were speculating that the academics would find another breakthrough and fight back from other places, so as to avoid causing an uncontrollable social disaster, and even damaging the economy of Zhongzhou State. But the real insiders would understand that this was impossible. The academics would not give up on a new breakthrough, but they would not give up on the Flourishing Age Fund either. The current slow investigation was undoubtedly to numb Emperor Dong's palace, and it was also some secret operation carried out by the academics. They were looking for a way to deal a heavy blow to the Flourishing Age Fund and the new group without causing a loss to the economy of Zhongzhou State. In fact, there was such a way, and it was very obvious. That was what the academics was doing now. The only way to break a deep-rooted economic monster in Zhongzhou State, and to ensure the stability of Zhongzhou State, was to use the power of another economic monster. An economic monster that was even more terrifying in size than the one to be broken. Only with its strong intervention could the situation be stabilized in the shortest time possible. And in the entire Zhongzhou state, among all the forces, there was only one economic monster that could be bigger than the Flourishing Age Fund. The Wang family of Beihai. During this time, the academics had been secretly negotiating with Wang Shengxiao, hoping that the Wang family of Beihai could take action. Wang Shengxiao can't delay for long, Qin Weibai said calmly. The problem of Liaodong can't be delayed. Yes. Military counselor smiled bitterly. I'm afraid I'm going to be very busy. The problem of Zhaoyu in Liaodong was no longer a problem that the supervisory department of Liaodong could fully control. It had to be reported. The supervisory department of Zhongzhou State was bound to take action for such a problem. The Southeast Group, which had been avoiding getting involved in the game between the academics and the new group, could be said to have no way to avoid it this time. Ji Wenjiang would definitely take a stand. His statement undoubtedly offended the academics to some extent. Under such circumstances, how could the Wang family of Beihai refuse to take action against the Flourishing Age Fund? In the eyes of the academics, there was no doubt that the Southeast Group and the Wang family of Beihai were already suspected to be on the side of Emperor Dong's palace. And the most important thing was that such a stance would not benefit the Wang family of Beihai at all. The supervisory department was bound to support the storm in Liaodong. And as a condition to ease the relationship with the academics, the Wang family of Beihai would definitely help the academics. This was the same as the new group supporting Wen Siyuan and suppressing Yi Dongsheng at the same time. The academics would also help the academics suppress the Flourishing Age Fund while suppressing Liaodong. The chaos was ahead. Everyone was making a choice. There was no friend or foe. It was just for themselves. You're tuning into the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.